All right, ladies and gentlemen, I will call this meeting to order. It is 4 p.m. on the meeting of November the 17th, 2020. And we will begin with the adoption of the agenda, looking towards administration first. Are there any additions or changes to the agenda?
None, thank you.
Perfect. Council, any discussion, changes? Then we are looking for, thank you, Councilor Nelson.
Move the council adopt the standing committee agenda November 17th, 2020.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Council, is there any discussion on that? Seeing none, then I will call that to question. All those in favor? Perfect. Thank you, Councilor Race. And that is unanimous. That brings us to Citizens Minute with Council, but I don't believe we have anybody for Citizens Minute today. So we will move on to delegations and presentations. The first delegation for this evening is by the Food Festival, which will be presented by Morgan Roberts. Hello, Morgan. Morgan, can you hear us?
I can. Can you hear me?
We see you talking, but we can't hear you.
Oh, that's a problem. Can you hear me now?
I can hear Morgan through the Zoom, so it's possible the speakers on location aren't on right now. For those in the stream, we will get this figured out right now.
She's not muted.
Doesn't seem like that. Is our volume turned down? Yeah, is our volume up? Her audio is working. Then our speakers are not.
There's a remote back there that runs that TV.
Morgan, we'll just turn up the volume on our end for a moment here. That's pretty loud there. Could be the little speakers beside the computer.
Did it say mute or unmute on the software?
They can hear it on Zoom. We just can't hear it.
Oh, what is this?
Morgan?
Interim test, can you guys hear us now?
Yep.
Yes, now we can.
Morgan, I think you're clear.
Okay. Thank you. Can you hear me?
Perfect. Thank you, Morgan. First of all, welcome, Morgan. Thanks so much. Sorry about the technical glitch, and we'll turn it over to you.
Okay. Well, thank you for having me here today. I am representing the Food Festival, and I've been asked to just give you a couple of minutes on what we did in 2020, and so we'll go from there. So 2020, obviously a bit of a challenging year. The Food Festival normally is a giant outdoor free festival that focuses on multiculturalism and inclusion and all those great things. And then of course with COVID, well, I mean, none of the open air festivals ended up happening this year. So we were very fortunate that we had a group of volunteers, our team, that stepped up, and the province eased some restrictions right at the last minute. And basically within a week of those restrictions being lifted, the Food Festival was able to sort of pivot and still hold a culturally relevant event on June 30th and July 1st, which is historically the time when we're celebrating the Food Festival. And we were all very happy to be able to do that. So most of you know, I mean, a few of you were out there volunteering, and we really appreciate did a drive-in movie. So as you can imagine, it was thrown together at the last minute, but we actually had 42 businesses locally that stepped up and helped us out, and about 25 volunteers. So what we decided to do, we wanted to make sure that everything was COVID friendly. So we had 4 drive-in movies that took place, 2 double headers. So 2 on the evening of June 30th and 2 on the evening of July 1st. We still partnered with a lot of our normal partnerships. The Chamber of Commerce actually hosted a car decorating contest for Canada Day instead of doing their parade. We asked the town if they wanted to speak. We had lots of great help, and it was really, really marvelous. So I really don't know what to say. It poured down rain the entire time, which really, looking back on it, really helped with the social distancing. We were able to have some of our food vendors come out, which are all small businesses and local charities that like to give back. We were able to keep with a lot of our core values of giving back to the community, keeping everything free and accessible for families and seniors. We were able to have, like I said, with the 4 showings, we were able to have 100 vehicles per showing. So that allowed us to have up to about 400 families come out and enjoy something on July 1st, which really was kind of amazing because there wasn't much going on. A lot of virtual events happening, which are great, but it sure is nice to be able to go out and attend something free and accessible even during the COVID time with your family.
Perfect.
So the movies that we ended up showing were Top Gun, The Goonies, Toy Story 4, and Dirty Dancing. And they were chosen by the committee with some feedback from some local community members that wanted to make sure that it was something that everyone would enjoy. So we had a nice selection there, and we had lots of great feedback. We had a ton of positive comments. We actually received very few complaints from the local neighborhood, which was great. And really, it went off very well, considering, like I said, it poured down rain for both days, as well as being that it's the middle of summer, you have to remember that you're starting these movies fairly late at night. The second showing ended up being a midnight showing. We had a giant screen, which is an inflatable screen, and you could see it from just about everywhere on the lot. It was really great.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Morgan. I'm going to turn it over to council to see if they have any questions. Council, do we have any questions for Morgan and the Foon? Councilor Nelson.
I guess looking forward to 2021, is Foon ready to roll with whatever is allowed to roll? Is the intent to do kind of maximize what can be done based on the circumstances that we're currently in?
So, Councillor Nelson, I appreciate that comment because we really don't know. You know, the committee itself is ready to put off something, but of course, with COVID guidelines changing every day and it being out of our control, we really don't know exactly what that's going to be. And it's kind of a challenging place to be in that a lot of groups are in right now, planning for the future. What is that going to look like? Are we going to be able to have things in a traditional format? A lot of festivals went to online viewing, and as you know, as great as that is, it definitely doesn't have the same social experience that goes along with that. So to sort of answer your question, yes, the festival is permitted to roll with the punches. We just don't know exactly what it's going to look like yet.
Perfect, thanks. Councillor Race. Councillor Race, you're muted.
I can't hear her.
Thank you. Morgan, could you be a bit more specific regarding the funding amount that you are requesting?
Thank you, Councillor Race. So we're asking for the same amount that we've had for the last number of years. It's an amount that's approximately $8,000, and I'm sure CAO Olson will be able to clarify exactly what that amount is. The reason why we are asking for that amount is that we don't know exactly what the festival will look like. If it's in its traditional format, which would be amazing, then we will absolutely be using all of those funds. If we're looking at an alternative event similar to what we did this year, we simply wouldn't be asking for all of them. This year, we did not use the full allocated amount, and we came back and only asked for what we actually needed.
Thank
And
you,
we feel as a
Morgan.
committee that that's responsible.
Thank you.
Perfect. Thanks, Councillor Race. Councillor Haas.
Yeah, excuse me, just a quick question, I guess, to next year's event, assuming, that we are maybe not able to have it. Is it an opportunity to maybe get some ideas from the community as to what are some maybe thoughts they have as alternatives that may not be the traditional way, but in the interim, just to assume there is not going to be, what we have seen in the past? Is that potentially, as the committee talked about that, to maybe gather some, because I'm sure there's people out there that maybe have some maybe ideas or experiences that other communities have done or other events since all of this. So I'm just curious, because I think, I hate to, think of the worst case scenario, but I'm concerned that we might have it and not leave it to the last minute kind of thing. And I mean, this year was a little bit different, but now knowing it. So I was just curious if that's ever been a topic of discussion as a committee.
So we've always been a very inclusive group. We are constantly recruiting if there are other voices or community members that would like to be involved in the committee. It certainly does take a lot of planning. I would say countless number of volunteer hours to put off any type of an event at this scale. And if there are other ideas out there, we're definitely open to them. And really, we did what was allowed based on the time frame that we had and the restrictions put in place by the government. It's really interesting. It was simply days before Canada Day that we were even allowed to hold an event of this size, and I really feel very proud of the committee and proud of the community for stepping up and to making it happen, because otherwise we would have been celebrating July 1st with not very much going on.
Thank you.
Okay. Council, any other questions or comments? Saying none, then Morgan, thanks for spending your time coming out and presenting to us tonight. As council goes through the budgeting process, if there's any more information that you'd like to present us with, or if council has any follow-up, certainly we'll be in touch with you by either phone or by email. And of course we extend that offer vice versa, because as we move forward, any information that we have helping with the budget is good information. So thank you.
Great. Thank you so much for including me today.
Thanks. Okay, council, we are moving on to our second delegation and presentation today, and that is a presentation by Kelly McTaggart from Canada's Oil and Natural Gas Producers, or from CAP, I should actually say, more appropriately titled, from the Canadian Association of Petroleum Producers. So Kelly, welcome to council this evening. We appreciate you taking your time to come and see us. We'll turn it over to you.
Perfect. Thank you so much for having me. I will share my screen. Just bear with me a moment. Perfect. Perfect. Okay. Go back and start from the beginning here. Okay, has everybody seen the home page here?
Absolutely.
Okay, perfect. Okay. I don't know why it keeps scrolling back. Okay, well, thank you for having me, everyone. It's nice to see you, albeit virtually. I did just want to touch base as the year is coming to an end, and there's been a lot going on this year in the industry, but also because of COVID. So I wanted to give an update on both of those fronts. So I'll jump right to it, knowing that I only have 10 minutes. So as I'm sure you're aware, we are the Canadian Association of petroleum producers. So we are the largest association in Canada, and we represent large and small producer member companies. And about 80% of the oil and gas in Canada is produced from our member companies. And then we also have associate members who provide a wide range of services to the oil and gas industry. A couple of things I wanted to outline that aren't necessarily as relevant today as they were in March, April, but CAP had 3 priorities at the beginning of COVID, and we are still paying, close attention to them. But as our priorities have shifted, which I'll talk about later in this presentation, I did want to touch on the 3 that we were focusing on, as I said, in March, and these were liquidity, so quick access to market capital for our producers and also for the industry. Protection of our essential workers, so individuals who are working in an operating capacity and had to be at site, especially keeping in mind COVID has been one of those we don't know what we don't know type of situations. So it was very important to ensure that our assets were running so that we could produce product to ensure that our hospitals and emergency services could continue to run. And then our 3rd priority was no harm or red tape reduction. So just ensuring that the regulatory system was moving things through so that we could ensure that the economy was staying in a somewhat stable condition. So very quickly, this is kind of our highlight, a snapshot of the economic impacts of the oil and gas industry in Canada. So we are the #1 single private investor in Canada. And we are trying to highlight this because as we look to economic recovery, especially in the way that stimulus is being provided, a lot of opportunity exists in this space from the innovation side of things. So Catherine McKenna, who was previously our Minister of Environment in Canada, is now our Minister of Infrastructure. And she's really managing the portfolio of a lot of these big projects that will be moving forward. And the environment continues to be a very huge focus of that. And the oil and gas industry is also the single largest provider of innovation funding in Canada. So there's a lot of opportunity there to provide stimulus. In terms of capital expenditure, in 2014, prior to the kind of initial recession that we saw in 2015, we had about $81 billion worth of capital expenditure in Canada. And this is important because it's not just an Alberta story, it really is a Canada-wide industry, and our supply chain numbers really show that. But we have seen a very large decline in capital expenditure. We're now at about half over the past few years, and we're looking to actually under 30 billion this year, our latest numbers. And then our last year, our numbers for contribution to GDP was about 6.1%, so quite significant. Again, this is just a snapshot of how many jobs are created from the oil and gas sector across the provinces. And these are last year's numbers, so we're still waiting for some of the StatsCan information. They were a bit delayed in areas of their survey. So some of the 2019 numbers haven't been published, but these are the most recent numbers as of about a year ago. Okay, so moving on, and this kind of paints the picture of where we're going. And I always like to include this infographic because it tells a few different stories. So if we look at the renewables or other renewables, which is the green, which consolidates all renewable resources in terms of energy in the world, these are the numbers that the forecasts that will hit if we meet our Paris Climate Agreement commitments by 2040. So this is the world energy mix, and that green column, the renewables, actually shows a 400% increase in renewables in the world. So a massive increase. 400% is as good as it gets, basically, from a renewables perspective. But it's very important to highlight that this is not outpacing other forms of energy. We do see quite a significant decline in coal as well as solid biomass, which has not been a large form of global energy production. but coal is where we're seeing the increase, but the largest increase actually is natural gas. So where we see oil leveling out a little bit, we've seen some peaks in the past 6 months actually in terms of this revised forecast, but natural gas is really paving the way, especially in the space of liquid natural gas development. So I did want to point that out. And I should say as well that, you know, we are seeing a stagnation in some of these resources in North America. It's the developing kind in India where we're really seeing a large increase in oil, natural gas, and then renewables really Okay, so this is a quick snapshot that I wanted to include in terms of, you know, different crises that we faced from early 1900 to 2020. And the total primary energy demand is set to drop about 6% in 2020. And then this is the largest relative decline in 70 years and the biggest ever decline in absolute terms. And we're seeing an issue in part because of storage capacities around the world. So when we saw a massive drop in the tanks in, you know, April, May, even into early June, which of course was it's nice to see a drop at the tank from a consumer perspective. But really why this was happening is because OPEC countries kept producing and we ran into a major issue of we didn't have anywhere from the non-OPEC producing countries to put our product. And so this flooded the market and we saw a massive crash. And it wasn't until June that OPEC and some of the other producing countries, including the Minister of Energy from Alberta, actually got together and came to terms with how to create more storage space. And that's when we started to see prices increase again. So the global energy demand forecasted recovery. So you can see the drop here. The one good news story is that we are expecting demand to, you know, to go back to normal. And we're starting to see, even in the markets just this week with the announcement of these vaccines, we've seen markets respond to that. And we have seen markets respond throughout kind of this 6 to 8 months that this has been taking place. But we don't think that we'll be back to normal levels until about 2022. So global investment in the upstream sector, which is really the primary sector for the Canadian industry, we're down about 32% this year, so quite significantly. After 2015, you can see the large decline there. We have been steadily growing over the last couple of years, but where we've really seen a lot of competition is from the States. They've really just, you know, opened up their markets under the Trump administration. And this has been a challenge for Canada because when the environment, the competitiveness environment is so accessible in the United States, it's been very hard to attract investment in Canada. So just to put this into perspective, you know, a couple of years ago when we were seeing massive investments in the Permian Basin in Texas, they were looking at well approval in about 7 days. The average amount of a well approval in Canada is about 100. So from an investment perspective, of course, we're going to see, you know, investors looking to invest in other basins. And also, you know, this is a good time to invest in Canada, I should say as well, because our dollar is very cheap. So we have certain elements of attractiveness on our side, but we just haven't been able to bring home the goods in the past couple of years. I'm going to skip over that, it's somewhat redundant. So, you know, in January, CAP released its 2019 estimate and 2020 forecast capital expenditures for the industry. And as I mentioned earlier, our 2019 estimate was about 35.1 billion for 2020, which isn't great. That's, you know, less than half of what we saw in 2014. Fast forward to May, we were over 8.6 billion below that forecast, and we're actually now around the 15. So we're in the 20 to 25 billion dollar range for capital investment this year. And what does this mean for Canada? So as I mentioned, we were looking at those 3 priorities at the beginning of COVID. So liquidity, which we've had a lot of success from the federal and provincial governments. We've seen massive investment in orphan well recovery in Canada, which is great because that solves 2 problems. We get people working, a lot of service providers who may have otherwise not been working right now. And we also have an environmental cleanup as well. And that's, you know, a lot of that was created from the damage of the 2014, 2015 recession. So there has been, you know, 2.5 to 3.5 between the provincial and federal governments put towards that. So very big dollars, which is great. And then red tape reduction, as I mentioned, and then keeping our essential workers safe. Now, as we move into economic recovery, which is really what we're looking at, and I think more optimistically, even more so in the past month or two because of these vaccination announcements. So now we've moved into, okay, how can we create and retain good jobs in Canada? And looking at generating long-term benefits for Indigenous communities, as I mentioned, advancing environmental leadership and building wealth and value while shrinking Canada's debt. So our debt ratio has actually increased about 45% in the past year. So we really need to focus on our export market to reduce that ratio. And I just included this because there are other jurisdictions in the world who have a very similar regulatory regime as us, Norway being, you know, the closest producing country in that space. And they have very quickly revised their regulatory system in terms of approval times and also drilling times to compete successfully for investment. So we like to use this as the gold standard. They were able to do this very quickly. And as I said, it's essential that we keep our environmental regulations. So we use this, well, we are using this as a bit of a benchmark right now to say, look, you know, to the federal government, it's been done in other jurisdictions and more complicated gas fields, oil and gas fields for that matter, because a lot of Norway's production is offshore. And so if they're able to do it, we should be able to do it no problem. So really using that as a blueprint. And one thing that we've been looking at over the course of the past few months is polling. So CAP, we always hire or outsource third-party polling to take stock of what's going on across the country and also what the Canadian priorities are and how oil and gas, given its you know, the significant contribution to the Canadian economy, where that fits with Canadians' values and priorities. And we've actually seen a very big shift over the last year. So I did want to include this. So on the right side here, typically the environment is in the top 5 priorities for Canadians. This is the several years that we haven't seen the environment make, you know, the top 5 list, which is, in my opinion, quite surprising. But also what this is showing is that economic recovery is a key priority for the majority of Canadians. So there's a lot of instability in terms of household income, job security, and kind of long-term forecasting for people's well-being. So these are the top 5 priorities, as I said. And then what else did I want to mention? So also, this is the first time that in quite a few years that the oil and gas industry has been considered essential to Canadians, over 60%. So for the past 5 years, we've been seeing that number hover around, you know, 58 to 60%, I would say. Whereas, you know, these numbers came out a couple months ago and we're over the 60%. So interesting perspective change because of this year's circumstances. Okay, and then So just to kind of start wrapping things up here, the good news. So there is good news, and I wanted to paint this picture a little bit. So ironically, I would say all three of our major pipeline projects are in construction, and this has been quite a remarkable lifeline in terms of employment for people throughout COVID-19. So the Trans Mountain Expansion project is well underway. They are expecting their in-service date to be on schedule. The Enbridge Line 3 replacement is the closest to being finished. On the Canadian side, the construction is complete. We continue to face some regulatory and permitting issues in the States, but all things considered, this will move ahead, and we're looking to see an in-service date in 2021. And then TC's Keystone XL project, there's been lots of questions over this in the past couple of weeks because of the US election. The latest and greatest from TC Energy is that this project will go ahead. They are a very patient company, as they self-describe themselves, and they've seen a flush of construction in the past couple of months, just to ensure that they're at a stage where the project will move through when Biden comes into office. That being said, issues that are political during a campaign don't necessarily translate into policy or project cancellation once a candidate is in office. So we're quite confident on that project as well. And then the other one that isn't shown on this map is TC Energy's Coastal GasLink project. So that's the LNG project that's part of LNG Canada. And this is in construction as well, and is moving ahead as scheduled. So in terms of current issues, I've touched on a few of these already, but one thing that I wanted to mention, because we are getting a lot of questions on it, is the US election. Biden has a very different approach to energy and energy policy than Trump, and this is actually a good news story for Canada. So one thing that we'll see right away is the US will rejoin the Paris Climate Agreement, and this is great because climate change does not have any borders. So this recommitment will be a very good news story, globally speaking, from an emissions point of view. And what it'll also do is it'll create a more competitive environment. So we're going to start seeing more emissions regulations, especially in the carbon and methane space, which is something Canada's been dealing with for the past decade, and we do very well. And we'll also see a push for renewables, and timelines, as I mentioned, will become longer in terms of approval. So that, combined with Canada's low dollar, and also our gas fields, which I'll touch on in a little bit, is a good news story for Canada. We will we'll hopefully see some capital investment and some international investment back into Canada from that, as well as Canadian-owned companies investing in our at-home basins. And then one thing that I mentioned was the gas piece. So for the first time ever, I didn't put this on this list, but, well, not for the first time ever, sorry. For the first time in quite a few years, this was the first summer where we didn't see gas prices dip below zero. And given the supply and demand issues that we're facing right now because of COVID, this is quite remarkable, actually. So our gas is valued at, it's still affordable, which is a good news story for producers, because they'll want to come in and invest still compared to other regions of the world. But we're also finally seeing quite a bit more value for our product. So our gas producers are doing quite well. 70% of the wells in Canada right now are gas wells, and we'll see continued investment in this space. Looking forward in terms of policy this year, the biggest policy piece from the federal level will be the Clean Fuel Standard. And I did want to flag this because I think we'll be hearing a lot more of it coming into the new year. It's quite similar in terms of hindrance as Bill C-69. and it will significantly affect the agricultural sector as well. So where we see clean fuel standards work in other jurisdictions, so there are standards in other countries. We've never seen a standard with liquids before, and so CAP is really advocating for a change on the liquid side. We are supportive of this, just like a carbon tax. CAP is supportive of a carbon tax. There's just changes that need to be made to ensure that we can remain competitive in Canada. So I just wanted to flag that. It's very early stages in terms of this policy, but they will start going through consultation phases on that. Speech from the throne.
I'd like to give my councillors a potential chance to ask some questions. So, I hate to ask you to maybe wrap things up a little bit, but if we could move on to that question section sooner rather than later, that'd be great.
Yeah, that's actually it. Those are the kind of the final priorities. I already touched on the speech from the throne and our economic recovery platform. So I will leave it there.
Perfect. Council, questions, comments? For myself, I do have one. Considering our position as a council, of a municipality of 10,000, one of the things that we're always trying to pay attention for are opportunities to create incentives and reasons for various businesses, including our energy sector, to come and do business in Hinton, especially considering our strategic position as a transport hub along both Highway 16 and the rail corridor heading out to the coast. So considering those sorts of factors, what advice would you have both for council and administration in moving forward to try and attract some of our energy sector into doing business in Hinton?
Mm-hmm. So, you guys are well positioned in terms of kind of where the basins are and where we're seeing investment. Hinton is in a great spot, and we're also seeing continued pipeline development in that area too. You're really not that far from, you're quite close to the TMX project. But one thing I always say is diversify. So don't focus all your attention, strictly on one component of the industry. I think in terms of service providers as well, which when we think about kind of localized business development, economic priorities, we want to look at innovation. So I would focus some attention on tech and innovation. As I said, that's where all of the money is coming from right now in terms of the federal and even a lot of the provincial funding as well. And then be kind to your businesses. I mean, there's a business tax issue or business taxation issues in certain parts of the province right now. We're definitely experiencing that in Calgary. And I think this is the time that we really need to be kind to our businesses across the board. Because when we look at supply chain, I mean, in areas such as yours, it's all linked back to oil and gas.
Well, I mean, to that end, if you know of any successful businesses that are looking for new places to do business, don't hesitate to point them our way.
Okay, I will. This is good timing. I'm at the Economic Developers Conference next week, so I'll keep my ear to the ground.
Perfect. Council, any other questions, comments, concerns? All right, then, seeing none. Kelly, thanks so much for your time today. We really appreciate you taking time out of your schedule, especially while you're busy conferencing, to speak with us. So we appreciate that. And if anything pops up and you tend to think of us and any opportunities, by all means, please get in touch with us.
Perfect. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Kelly.
Bye.
Bye-bye. All right, Council, that brings us to our third delegation and presentation, and that is from the Hinton Municipal Library Board, presented by Mr. Hank Smith. So we'll see if we have Hank available here. And we have, awesome, there we go. Perfect. Gentlemen, thanks a lot for coming tonight. All right. Council, that brings us to our third delegation and presentation, and that is from the Hinton Municipal Library Board, presented by Mr. Hank Smith. So we'll see if we have Hank available here. And we have, awesome, there we go. Perfect. Gentlemen, thanks a lot for coming tonight. Council, that brings us to our third delegation and presentation, and that is from the Hinton Municipal Library Board, presented by Mr. Hank Smith. So we'll see if we have Hank available here. And we have, awesome. There we go, perfect. Thank you so much.
That was a great testimony.
One more time.
Your lips weren't even moving and you were.
You know, that's when you have a lonely childhood, what can you do? No, I apologize there for any technical issues. We seem to have a little bit of a time delayed echo going on. So thanks for your patience. We'll try this one more time. We will go to Hank, who's presenting on behalf of the Hinton Municipal Library Board. Hank, thanks so much for taking time out of your evening to be with us, and we'll turn it over to you.
Well, thank you very much, Ryan. And to help me with this, I also have Anio, the manager of the library. We're going to tag team this.
Thanks for your patience. We'll try this one more time. We will go to Hank, who's presenting on behalf of the Municipal Library Board. Hank, thanks so much for taking time out of your evening. Hank, it sounds like when the Hinton Library computer is unmuted, it's getting, I'm not sure if you're hearing it, but a very long, delayed sort of reverberation of what we're saying on our end.
That's the
sorry,
network stream delay. Whoever has their stream needs to close it. The YouTube stream is delayed by a number of seconds, so I think somebody's live mic has that on.
I do not have the live stream going at all, other than I just have Zoom going on my end here. Can you guys hear me at least?
We can hear you, Hank.
Okay,
it's when
good.
the Hinton Library computer unmutes that we were getting the long reverb.
Okay, so should we continue or should we wait till this to get resolved?
Josh, if the Hinton Library computer has the live stream open on another window, if they could close that, that would probably fix the problem.
Anyway, that would be your screen.
Yeah. And then we can try it.
Ain't technology grand.
So that's closed.
Thank you.
Awesome. Oh, that's better.
Okay, good. Well, thank you, Ryan, for that great introduction. 5 times is the charm, I think, isn't it? So
Absolutely.
just looking at what's in front of you, I believe you guys are seeing our PowerPoint presentation as well. Is that correct?
You bet.
Okay, on that second one where you got the people sitting in the chairs, I would like to just say that we've actually had a very active board members, and most of these members, as you can tell, are volunteers, and I'd like to read the names out to you guys so you guys can at least have it on the record as well. Other than myself, we also have Amanda Yarowski. She is our vice chair this time. Jace Rush, Hannah Shermansky, Scott Kovach, and of course our council rep, which is Trevor Haas. And we'd like to thank them all for the years of service they've given us. And we've just voted in, we had our organization meeting in October and had voted everyone into their place again. So thanks to them. Anu is going to deal with the staff area, that slide.
Thank you. So my name is Anayo. So I'm the library manager here at Hinton Municipal Library. So currently we have 9 staff working at the library. So we have 2 in management, so myself and the assistant manager. So we have 2 librarians, 3 library assistants, 1 clerk, and 1 page.
Okay, the next slide, it just tells us our vision. Our vision has been with us for quite some time. It's open doors, open books, and open minds. Next is our mission statement, which again hasn't changed too much, but is also there for you guys to review. We won't deal with that one too much. And the next slide is the programs. This one I'll let Anna you talk on.
All right, so thank you. So most of our programs this year were done remotely via our social media platforms. And here is the list of the programs that we have in 2020. But one of the programs I would like to discuss with you today is the Feed the Need to Read program, which is highlighted in red. This was an initiative and a partnership with Hinton Library, Fraser Brothers, two of the Fraser Brothers, and Walmart. During the beginning of our closure, the library reached out to Fraser Brothers and Walmart to provide us with a space um, in their establishment to display free books where our residents can go and take free books. And the library supplied the books, and Fraser Brothers and Walmart supplied the space. And through this initiative and partnership, we provided over 400 books to our community between March and July of this year. So we are very proud of this partnership, and we'll continue to work with businesses in town and other stakeholders in town to promote our literacy in Hinton. So the next, that brings us to the next slide, which is more of our summer programs. So again, it's more of partnership between the library and other stakeholders in town. So this year has been an unusual year, which means different from the way we've done things in the past. But it also created an opportunity for us to build strong ties with other stakeholders in town. In summer, we partnered with the museum, Family Resource Network, which is a subdivision or a division of FCSS, and also with BEST, which is bringing empowered students together, a subdivision of Grand Yellowhead Public School Division. So to deliver some of these programs that you're seeing right here on the screen, and we also delivered crafts to families at homes. So we drove to families that registered in our summer programs, and we dropped and delivered crafts to them. And this is a partnership that was successful, and we would like to continue with this partnership. So we've also introduced the community reads. So the community reads is a program. This was introduced during our closure and is still ongoing. So it's a program where we encourage families, friends, neighbors, organizations to record themselves or why they read a book or a poem. And we at the library combine those videos and publish this on the videos on our social media and to promote literacy in Hinton. So we've done that so far. The library board has done it. FCSS has done it. And we have businesses in town that are interested in doing as well. So the next slide will be Hank.
Yes, again, with this COVID-19, you guys have probably had to discuss that. I did not see it. But again, just to tell you, we're on phase 4 of our reopening strategy, which means you are welcome to come to the library. We have a max of 35 people, thanks to good old Todd Martins from the Hinton Fire Department and helping us with the numbers that we can get in there safely. Also, you are able to browse the stacks as of right now and use computers as long as you register with one of the library techs or librarians that we have on site. And we also have use of the nice extra 3 rooms in the back of the library, which were the learning center rooms, which we've been using for study halls, and that's been used quite extensively already. Thanks for that. Yeah, other than that, if our numbers, just to say one thing, if the numbers of COVID in Hinton rise to a certain amount, since we are a town-owned building, we will also follow the town's recommendations when it comes to COVID closures and to updates. I just want to make sure that that we're on the same page, and thanks for Laura for keeping us in the loop on that. Okay, the next slide. Just tells you the status of our projects right now. Again, we have a library furniture. It is all nicely stored away until after COVID is complete, because again, it's it isn't how can I say, easily to be cleaned, and so we'll need to. We have purchased other ones in the meantime for this, as well as rearranged the library a bit to accommodate easier cleaning of plastic and pleather surfaces, put it that way. Okay. The computers we're in progress of replacing in the library. This is something that we set money aside for in our budget, and I just want to make sure that you guys do understand that there are already, I believe, 8 to 10 of them in the library. There are 6 set up, I'm sorry. But again, we are doing that because of COVID, and there has to be spaces between the computers. So we have room for them all if COVID ever does leave us. So, okay. The next slide is our budget, which is also myself. Again, you could see what we've done in 2020 and 2021. We do realize that being closed for some months from the beginning of COVID until early June, that there was a cost savings to the town. We had also talked with ANEO, talked to Carla as well, Fox from your finance department, and we set aside $180,000 from our reserves to go and help for the next 3 years. She asked that it would be placed on over a 3-year period and not a 1-year period. So that's why you see the red 60,000s in the transfer from reserves. Also, the percentage decrease shows the difference of what our ask is, and minus the 60,000 to what is our total ask. So again, you can see we're about 8% or thereabouts down each of the 3 years. Thanks to our COVID, thanks to the savings that our library has found through our employees not needing to work. So again, this is also just a 3-time thing. As you can see in 2024, that 60,000 seems to run out. And I just want to make sure that you guys do understand that as we increase, this is just projected. It is just like any of your other departments that you have. I'm pretty sure they're doing the same thing as we did here, because again, ANEO has also gone over to Carla to ask for help with, and as well as Laura, into creating these budgets in the first place. So, okay, so any questions on this slide, guys? Or do you want to keep all your questions till the end?
I do have a question for right now, but certainly we can entertain questions at the end too. Councillor Haas?
It's not really a question, just a statement on the reserves. And I know Hank, you mentioned, but I just want to highlight that this was, staff not working during that period of time. And, and unfortunately, I mean, like as the board, we've talked about, and we talked about doing the 180,000 for this year. But when talked to the corporate services, it was best to do that 60,000 over the years. So, yeah, that was due to unfortunately not having the staff present. But we did, take advantage of that. We could have put it in the reserve, but thought it would be best to over the next 3 years to kind of help with the budget a little bit. So, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Trevor.
I think we're good to carry on, Hank, and then if we have any questions, we'll certainly bring them forward.
Okay, just to tell you, as you can see from previous slides from ANEO, he also stated that the programs, we're one of the only ones in our region in West Yellowhead that is actually running programs online. Jasper at this moment is still closed. They're still in and then Edson had a manager just flip over, and so they're slowly coming back. But again, Hinton's been doing the whole area, which is great, because we're getting higher numbers, and it's showing that the value that our library does. Again, so okay, I would like to go to the next slide if possible. Oh, that's the one that you guys are on already. Okay, these are also what's in our library reserves, and what our plan of service has actually stated that we're doing, and that is to come up with a 3D printer and a computer for it, makerspace counter and chairs. We have the makerspace bins already, so this is just for the counter and chairs, and the sewing machine, and you see what the total is at 13,700. So these are still in reserve above the 180,000 that we'll be not collecting from the town for. Does that make sense? Yes. Okay. And now we go into statistics, and I'm going to pass this on to Anu.
Thank you. So as of the end of 2019, so we have a total of 28,000 plus items in our collection. So out of this total number of items in our collection, we have 23,000 print volume and 5,000 plus non-print. And these 5,000 plus non-print volumes include audiobooks, music, and videos. So we had a total of 161,200 in-person visits last year, visit the library. So we arrived at this number by recording the number of in-person visits per week, then multiply that by 50 weeks. So that's how we arrived at this number. So we also had a total of 332 program sessions in 2019. Out of that, 203 sessions were children programs and 43 sessions were young adults. 41 sessions were adults and 45 sessions were for families. So bringing the total number of participants of our program in 2019 to 3,981 participants. So next slide will be our plan of service, and Hank will discuss this section.
As you can read there are 3 points that really we're focusing on, and that is early literacy, express creativity, and lifelong learning. These are all 3 that the library has chosen to move forward on. So yeah, that's all I need to say on that. Again, thank you for letting us present to you, and we're open for questions now.
Perfect. Thanks, Hank. Council, questions? All right. Not seeing any. Gentlemen, we just want to thank you for your time. Oh, sorry, Councillor Haas.
Just, I guess, one of the things that, if you don't mind, to highlight too, when we brought up the 3D printer and the computer and all that, something that we've also been trying to do and actually looked at our policy in regards to sponsorships. We're really looking at what, community organizations, businesses might be interested in sponsoring some of these things as well. So we're trying to, bolster that option as well when it comes to the library financially. And it's something that we've been talking about too, because I know, the tech room has been a tech room for a very long time, but I mean, the amount of dollars that come into the library is way past, beyond. So there's another opportunity for other sponsorships. So that's something that as a board we've discussed, and I know as as management, they also too are also looking at those avenues as well. So we're not just always looking at reserves or other options for money. So and the other thing I wanted to personally just highlight is that online thing that the staff did. I mean, I know that there was some conversation in the communities of why there was staff still on when COVID was happening, but the amount of online programming that they offered was amazing and continued to do so. And and I even just talking today how some kids are still using it in the partnerships with the other, as they mentioned, with the different organizations, specifically the museum as well. So I just wanted to applaud the efforts that were made and during the COVID situation and the closure of the library. So that's all I had to say. Thank you.
Perfect. Council, any last comments or questions? All right, well then again, seeing none, gentlemen, thanks so much for taking time out of your busy schedules today to come talk to us. The same thing I've been trying to reiterate to all our visitors is on behalf of council, if there's any follow-up, if there's any additional information on your part, or if there's any further questions from us, please vice versa, feel free to get in touch with us and we'll do the same with you. As we move through the budget process, it just helps clarify any questions we have as we're trying to hammer out this year's budget.
Good. Thank you very much, Ryan and council.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Have a great night.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, council, we are going to move on to our action items. The first action item is Land Use Bylaw 1088-16 on page 31 of our agenda package. presented by our CAO, Ms. Olson. Ms. Olson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The amendments proposed by administration continue to support and clarify the use and interpretation of the land use bylaw by the public and by administration, the correction of errors, omissions, and updates to language and the land use district map, continue to refine the document through understanding that only real life experience can bring to light. With that in mind, the recommended action tonight on the changes proposed for the land use bylaw 1088-16 is that committee recommend council give land use bylaw 1088-16 first reading on December 1st, 2020 as presented, and that committee recommend council to schedule a public hearing on January 5th, 2021 at 4 p.m. in council chambers to hear public comments on bylaw 1088-16. Mr. Vanna is joining us tonight if council has any questions.
Perfect. Good evening, Mr. Vanna. Thanks for joining us.
So if you have any questions, happy to answer them.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Council, do we want to begin with any questions or concerns? I guess, Mr. Vanna, I'll start. And I'd like to begin just with the identification around, the differentiation between the RMAN, Manufactured Housing District, and the RMHS, Manufactured Housing Subdivision District, and then the RMHP, Manufactured Housing Park District. Trying to get that distinction between essentially lots that are held by private landowners is my understanding, versus of course our rental parks, those organizations that are renting land to tenants who pay taxes. This is not a new area of concern for me, but I'm always trying to find new ways to approach an old problem. Are there any levers in there that, if it was the will of council, we could use now that we would have our manufactured housing park districts identified separately, to address some of the concerns that local citizens have around safe access and infrastructure in mobile home sites, while still respecting the fact that, that's provincial law and territory regarding the parks themselves?
Mr. Chairman, I guess to answer that question, this particular amendment is really going back to what we had in the land use bylaw before. And so simply to clarify the differences between the two, privately held versus ones where you have a manufactured home park. Does it clarify the issue of the state of condition of some of the parks? The answer simply is no. It's not a land use bylaw issue. It would be one thing to say that if we were creating a new park, it could be held to a new standard. The difficulty is that we have existing trailer parks that are there, and it's difficult. You can't retroactively go back and then hold them to a higher standard unless they totally redevelop, and so that's the difficulty there.
Okay, thank you for that. Council, further questions? Seeing none, then the recommendation from administration is that the council recommend giving this first reading. Councilor Ostashik.
I'd like to move that committee recommend council to give land use bylaw number 1088-16 first reading on December 1st, 2020 as presented, and that committee recommend council to schedule a public hearing on January 5th, 2021 at 4:00 p.m. in the council chambers to hear public comments on bylaw number 1088-16.
Perfect. Thank you, Councilor Ostashik. Would you like to speak to that at all?
Sure. Well, sure. Quickly. It's just that I believe that's an important first step in getting to the public hearing stage, so that we can take a look at a deeper look at anybody that might have any concerns about any of the updates that are proposed to land use bylaw number 1088.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Thanks, Councilor. Council, we do have the request for a recommendation on the floor. Do we have anybody who'd like to speak to it? Seeing none, then we will call this to question. That committee recommend council to give land use bylaw number 1088-16 first reading on December 1st, 2020 as presented, and that committee recommend council to schedule a public hearing on January 5th, 2021 at 4 p.m. in the council chambers to hear public comments on bylaw number 1088-16. Any questions? Seeing none, we will call that to question. All those in favor? And that is carried unanimously. Thank you, Councillor Race. I got you. Very good. All right, that takes care of that particular item. We will move on to action item number 2, which is the water treatment plant status update on page 141. And this will also be presented by our CAO, Ms. Olson. Ms. Olson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The town of Hinton and West Fraser have been in discussions on the future of potable water treatment in Hinton for a number of years. A lot of work has gone into reaching the agreements that are in place currently, including the umbrella agreement signed by both parties in 2018. Very few public discussions have taken place on this item due to the confidential nature of the agreements and sequencing of phase 1 and 2. I'm going to touch on just a couple of things in the report before inviting questions from council. Phase 1 of the umbrella agreement was completed when the town assumed operations at the water treatment facility from West Fraser, as well as a number of other steps. However, the goal of the transition was and still is to eliminate any liability to West Fraser in their involvement in potable water supply to the town. In order to reach that goal, water treatment plant bypass solution was developed in collaboration with both parties. Phase 2 of the umbrella agreement focuses on the steps necessary to support and construct the bypass solution. The original date included in the agreement was to commission and commence service through the bypass by January 2022. At minimum, this project takes about 3 years to achieve, at minimum. Several delays were experienced in advancing phase 2, including turnover in both organizations, as well as decision-making needed in order to advance phase 2. In 2020, with new management on both sides, essential discussion and collaboration on next steps was initiated and has taken place. West Fraser, including mill manager Paul DiGiulio, have been approachable, forward-thinking, and very community-minded throughout the discussions that have taken place. Early on, through those discussions, additional costs that the town incurs or contributes to were identified and verified. Language in the agreements provided the opportunity and timelines for review of the actual operating costs and impacts of the water services agreement. However, no review has taken place to date. The costs discussed amount to approximately $310,000 and include payment for power, rent, as well as contributions to lagoon maintenance. These have been funded through the 2021 budget and will be included in the package that council receives to discuss this weekend. They are also best discussed through the context of that budget document, along with the information on the capital costs and operating expenditures. There were several unknowns, including the actual cost for power, so this review and discussion around these was expected, and we were happy to enter into those discussions. Administration tonight has sought to provide this information to council in this report and to the public to provide clarity to this agreement and the substantial commitment to the water treatment plant bypass prior to budget deliberations. The work to commence in 2021 is on the engineering and design side of the bypass to refine project budgets. As well, earlier this year, a grant application was prepared to submit to the Alberta Wastewater Partnership Program and is ready to submit in early 2021. So all the work has been done. That would come through a report to council to approve the grant application, but everything is prepared and ready to go. So this program could see funding provided to the project. This time, I just want to acknowledge I have Mr. Dale Woloshin as well as Mr. Richard Toombs present tonight to assist in answering any of council's questions on this topic. Understanding that there may be pieces with certain areas of the agreements that may be difficult to answer directly due to confidentiality. We'll do our best to manage what the council would like to touch on and discuss further. Both Mr. Woloshin and Mr. Toombs have been involved in the project since the beginning. and have a good understanding of the history and the project itself. So welcome to them. At this time, if council has any questions, we'd be happy to receive them.
Perfect. Council, this is over to us then for any questions. So looking for any interest. Suppose I'll begin to try and lead things off. And not so much a question, more so a comment. I do appreciate that administration has basically got a grant application in the works and ready to go on this project. I think that's important, especially when we're considering, you know, the large capital expenses involved with water treatment in Hinton, regardless of the direction that we go. So I'd just like to say thank you on that for right now. Council? Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll put forward the direction of the committee to accept the water treatment plant status update report for information.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Council, we have the recommended action on the floor put forward by the mayor. That committee accept the water treatment plant status update report for information. Any further discussion on that? Councillor Race, just so you know, I can't, oh, there we go. Any further discussion? Seeing none, then I will call that to question. That committee accept the water treatment plant status update report for information. All those in favor, please indicate. Thank you, and that is carried unanimously. Thank you, Ms. Olson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to offer to council, should you encounter any questions or need for clarification, any work that administration can do ahead of budget discussion, we're happy to look into things and prepare answers to any questions that council might have on this as we discuss it in context of budget.
Perfect. Thank you. All right, council, we will move on to our next action item, and that is the proposed disc golf course operating agreement. And this also will be presented by Ms. Olson. Ms. Olson?
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Previous direction from council has supported a partnership between the town of Hinton and the Hinton Disc Golf Association, including a partnership agreement to establish terms and expectations from both parties. The disc golf course operating agreement reflects the expectations, obligations, roles, and responsibilities of the association and the town in relation to the disc golf course. Within the agreement, 2 areas emerged as requiring council's direction and decision as they relate to the 2021 budget. Acknowledging the maintenance activities that the HDGA performs, an opportunity the association will have to seek external funding sources. A municipal contribution supports both operational work that would need to be outsourced and capital amounts to support management of the asset. This amount of $8,000 total has been considered and included in the agreement. Direction on this from council is being sought in order to incorporate the funding allocation in the 2021 budget and moving forward. Recommended action on this item is that committee recommend council approve the disc golf operating agreement between the Hinton Disc Golf Association and the town of Hinton as proposed, and that the town's financial contribution to the agreement be funded from a taxation increase to offset the town's increased operational and reserve commitments. This time, Ms. Howard and Mr. Von Favren are present tonight to assist in answering any questions that council might have. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Council, any questions? Councilor Nelson.
I guess more of a comment than a question, but I was actually a little bit caught off guard by the financial ask. We had discussed an agreement to understand roles and responsibilities and who owns what and who does what, but this was the first time that a financial contribution, from what I recall, has been asked, and I don't recall it being presented when disc golf was coming. So I was a little bit caught off guard by it, and although it's not a huge number in the scheme of things, as it stands tonight, I wouldn't recommend council approving it. If somebody were to make that direction, I would probably make an amendment or request for it to be postponed until after or during budget. I don't have a major issue with it being included in the budget presentation, so that we have that context of what $8,000 looks like, but I'm certainly not ready to recommend approving an operating agreement without understanding the context of the ask in our entire budget. So thank you.
Council? Councillor Haas.
Yeah, I have to agree. I was a little bit taken back. I understood that we would be covering the lease and those expenses from what I gathered, but that it wasn't any different than what we we're already doing, is what my understanding was. But I was too taken back a little bit about with the wanting money for specialist work and operating expenses, and then also looking at putting into reserve, potentially, having more additional holes. Because I feel somewhat the same is that, budget wise, I just feel, in starting the relationship between the two as a course, it's working very well, but to now also look at, dollars and cents and everything at this time, I think to me is a little bit premature, in my opinion. See how things go and where that is, and then look at maybe, for me, I think we've got enough 2021 budget issues, even though it is $8,000 or maybe $8,000 more, but it is another line item that I wasn't expecting at all. So I would have to also have that conversation in budget more to accept this evening. So thank you.
I think, Councillor Nelson.
Specific question would be, is there a deadline or kind of date check-ins that make the signing of the agreement urgent, or is that agreement something that could wait until after budget, providing potentially budget happens relatively quickly this year?
Ms. Olson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I may look to Ms. Howarth and Mr. Von Claveren, but I will, prior to handing it over to them, this was slated to come before council a little bit earlier. We were engaged in discussions with the Hinton Disc Golf Association and got to a point where we were able to bring a report, prioritize that to bring it in front of council prior to budget, knowing that there was a financial discussion that was taking place as part of the agreement negotiation. As far as timelines outside of budget, I would look to Ms. Howard or Mr. Von Claveren if there's any impact to a delay.
Ms. Howard?
Thank you. So yes, we are a bit late in bringing this report to council. I believe the direction was for October 31st is when we were hoping to bring it. So it's a little bit late. We have been continuing to work on the agreement with the association. As we're in the winter months, it is the quieter time operationally for that outdoor facility. So we could certainly postpone some decisions around the agreement till the end of the year or early next year, as long as we have some sort of direction before we start the next season, and whether there's any financial contribution from the town and for the partnership or not. So it can definitely be brought forward with the budget presentation this weekend. We just didn't want it to be seen the first time this weekend with the budget, with the whole context, and then not wanted to bring it after the budget was approved either. So it's kind of a little bit of a chicken egg here, but thanks.
Perfect. Thank you. Did you want to follow up on that, Councillor Nelson? Okay. Councillor Wall?
Hi, a question for admin. The operating agreements we have with other nonprofits, do they include the annual capital and operating expenditures as well, or contributions, sorry?
I'll defer to Ms. Howard.
Ms. Howard?
Yes, they do. Originally, when we had these many years ago, they weren't as clear as they are now. One of the things that we've learned over the years that we get better at each time we go into partnerships with these organizations is that it's best to have those conversations up front so everyone knows what the expectations are, and also recognizing what the true impact is of taking over facilities or partnering to deliver programs and services. So yes, most of the, I'm thinking off the top of my head, our key ones for sure have that written right in their agreements now. As we've renewed those agreements, we've cleaned that up a little bit.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor.
I'd like to put forward that committee recommend council approve this golf course operating agreement between the Hinton Golf Association and the town of Hinton as proposed. And if I can speak to that.
Mr. Mayor, please do.
Well, thank you, Ms. Howarth, for speaking to that. If this is the way we do our deals, to me, this is what is the role of administration. They bring forward something that shows both sides what they want. It's up to us to decide. If 8,000 is the issue, we talk about that, right? We focus on that. I have no problem going to regular. I personally think $8,000 is a minute price to pay for such a nice facility. If we really microanalyze all the costs for all our parks, we spend millions and millions for playgrounds. We're spending $250,000 for one at Gerard Redmond. We have 14 in our community. Over a 25-year span for this, that would still be less than $250,000 for 25 years. This is a small price to pay if we were to do it ourselves as a municipality. But like I said, it's the will of council. Perhaps the number is not 8,000, but I like this agreement. It's concise. It has everything from both sides that are comfortable, and now we have to find our place of comfort for it. And I have no problem having that debate in regular council chambers. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have myself up next. I was certainly willing to consider waiting until after it had come to budget. I saw merit with that, but that being said, now that it's on the table as a request for us to consider, I'm very happy to support this moving forward. I mean, ultimately, the buck ultimately stops with the budgetary process, and that's where council certainly has the final say on how much we're going to fund to various projects in a given year. But I do like the framework, and I do appreciate administration's work in making sure that those costs are apparent and that they're upfront, and that we know what we're getting ourselves into, so to speak. So thank you, Mr. Mayor, for putting that forward. I'll be supporting this. Thank you. Councilor Nelson?
Yeah, I won't vote in favor of it only because it's that committee recommend council, and until I've seen budget, I have not seen a single budget document and have any idea what it looks like. I can't, as committee, recommend that council approve something. I've struggled with this committee recommend thing, and if I had an idea what budget looked like, I think I probably would support it, and I'm happy that it's going to regular council. I just can't recommend as a committee member to invest dollars without previously seeing the budget, and to me, that's as much as only $8,000. This is something that we've in the past. It's come back and bit us a little bit, making these decisions outside of the budget cycle and not understanding the context. So although $8,000, I'm pretty sure it's something I'm going to support. Philosophically, I can't recommend it without seeing the budget first. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Nelson. Councilor Race. You're muted, Councilor Race.
Sorry. Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is directed to administration. What has caught me off guard is page 147, where it talks about municipal contribution funding. So I would say to people, for us to give this $8,000 to disc golf, that means that we may have a tax increase because of this $8,000, or our service levels may be hit because of this $8,000. That seems very unfamiliar to me. Did we say the same thing to HIMBA for the monies that they are requesting? So this language just seems foreign. So can anybody talk to me about that?
Ms. Olson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So with established agreements like with HIMBA, with the Chamber of Commerce, through the civic agencies, I guess, portion of the budget, those have come before council in presentations to solidify their ask. So that prepares council to have a conversation during budget about what their appetite is moving forward. An example, I guess, that may fit is with the Chamber of Commerce. So there was an additional ask last year that was supported through reduction in the budget and not a increase to taxation. So I don't know if that provides a little bit of an example or some context, but other agencies that are requesting money have come before council requesting that. This is a little bit different. It's a little bit out of sync because we are looking at the agreement right now. Disc Golf is not a confirmed civic agency and doesn't fit in there quite yet because we have no agreement. So they were not invited to present to council as the agreement was being worked out currently.
And I guess, oh, sorry, Councillor Race, did you want to follow up on that at all?
I did. Just a quick comment. You know, I still have many questions, so I will not be supporting this motion. Thank you, sir. Sorry.
Thank you. And I guess I'll just build off of Councillor Race's question. Where I don't necessarily agree that right away we need to jump to a recommendation to increase the offset, you know, by a taxation increase. Wouldn't it be possible for council prior to budget sort of being solidified, this could be built in as an anticipated line item budgeted for, and then if it was the will of council not to approve the operating agreement, those funds could then be voted on by council to go to another area. That's something we could do, correct?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. At this time, that amount has not been included in any of the budget documents. It's to be determined because there was no motion to include it in the budget at this point, to come forward for discussion during the budget process. But at this point, it hasn't been included because the method of funding that hasn't been determined, whether we are reducing service levels elsewhere or we're including it as a taxation.
For sure. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For the sake of moving forward, because I do respect the idea of seeing the budget, and that's why I didn't add the second paragraph to part of my motion or direction, because I just want to approve this. So with that being said, and hearing what council's kind of saying around the table, I'd like to withdraw my motion, my direction, and put something else forward.
Council will just look around the table. Councillor Ostashik?
Yeah, I am opposed to Mayor Michael's withdrawing his original motion.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Ostashik. Because we need unanimous consent to have that withdrawn from the table, it does remain. So we do still have the
point of order. And now it goes to a vote, to my knowledge.
Okay. Mr. Mayor, I think what I'll do, just because I want to make sure legislatively we're following the proper procedure, I will call a 5-minute break. Actually, no, we'll give everybody the bio break, the 7 minutes. So we will reconvene at 5:34. And if administration and the mayor could touch base on that legislatively, that would be awesome. Thank you. And we will break. Thank you very much.
Just majority.
Pardon?
Majority.
Right, if one person opposes, then it goes to a vote.
Well, it's not supposed to go to a vote anyways.
Well, no, if there's no objection, there's no vote.
Depends how you read it, remember?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So under the council procedure bylaw under 15.5, it states after a motion has been moved, it may not be withdrawn without the majority consent of council.
Perfect. All right, council. So, Mr. Ostashik, Councillor Ostashik.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Before it's called to question, I just have a procedural question, and that's if the motion to withdraw is debatable or not.
I believe it's not, but I will look to administration for guidance on that.
Not debatable.
Perfect. So then we will immediately call that to question. Council, we are voting in favor of withdrawing the motion. Again, just for transparency's sake, if you are voting in favor, it is to withdraw the motion. If you are voting against, it is to leave the motion on the table. So again, in favor to withdraw and against would be to leave it on the table. Any questions on that clarification? Councillor Race, is that clear? You got that?
So you're going to ask the question if we want that motion to be withdrawn?
That is correct.
Okay, good. Got it.
All right, perfect. Council, all those in favor, please indicate. All those opposed? Councillor Race, could you just clarify for me, was that opposed?
I am supporting it being withdrawn.
Okay, so that is in favor. We'll try that one more time for clarification. All those in favor, please indicate. All those opposed? And that is carried 4-3, with those opposed being Councillors Ostashik, Councillors Waugh, and Councillor Hawes. Mr. Mayor?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to put forward that committee recommend the disc golf course operating agreement between the Hinton Golf Association and the Town of Hinton be brought to a regular council meeting for decision. And if I can speak to that.
Please
We're
do.
hearing council, and I think there's valid points for the budget. It's my personal thoughts. It's something I'll approve, but I think a conversation regarding the cost, the specifics can be had. I think insight on the budget prior is extremely valid. Let's have that. Then when this comes to regular, we'll have a clearer picture, and then we can do that. And as Councillor Nelson supported, I spoke about this a long time ago. I don't like the wording also of committee recommend to approve, because there are things that we want to bring to regular that we actually don't want to approve, but we want to go on the record to not approve. So that is, I can respect that. So for me, it doesn't change much, but I think this helps us move forward and not have a longer debate tonight. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I'm just going to make sure that your direction reads as intended. That committee recommend council approve. That doesn't look like what you had put forward.
Okay. Committee recommend. Yeah, that's, I think that would be good with discuss, council discuss this. If I may, Mr. Chair, if I could just put that committee recommend council bring forward the disc golf course agreement between the HDGA and the Town of Hinton at a regular council meeting for decision. Thank you. And thank you for that clarification, Mr. Chair. I'm comfortable with that.
Okay, I'll just wait until the final changes are made to make sure that that reflects your intention, Mr. Mayor. Good. All right, council, we do have a direction on the table. That committee recommend council bring forward the disc golf course operating agreement between the HDGA and the Town of Hinton at a regular council meeting for decision. Any discussion? Any discussion? Councillor Ostashik?
Mr. Chair, I guess I would ask the question of what regular meetings would be brought forward.
Thank you, Councillor. Mr. Mayor, I think in this case that's more appropriately directed to you.
I guess, thank you, Mr. Chair. At this moment, I think I'd leave that with the agenda committee, seeing that hopefully we can get some insight at the budget meetings. If not, then that would give us the opportunity to perhaps wait till it would have to be the January meeting. But ultimately, if we get the insight, the information from the budget, I'd want it to be at the December 1st meeting.
Very well. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Nelson.
Just procedurally, I guess the question is, the agenda will be approved prior to our budget discussions. So if it's waiting for budget, then it would have to be January, because agenda prep would approve it this Thursday. We don't start budget until Friday, so. Oh no, we have a week off. Yeah, thank you.
I'm going to go to Councillor Ostashik next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So with that clarification, I do have some additional concerns then. This makes the process rather awkward, and that we're going to be potentially discussing something during budget deliberation that council has not actually moved forward as a direction that they want to move forward in. In my opinion, the previous recommended motions were much cleaner, as in the first one was, do you want to move ahead with this agreement, yes or no? And if the answer is yes, then how do you want to fund it? And to me, that decision could have potentially been made tonight, or it could have been directed to be part of the budget discussion, and then through budget deliberation, council could have decided if it was appropriate to fund it through taxation increase or to fund it through an offset by reduction in some other department, or possibly there's some potential carryover money that could be utilized for that, for this year at least. So to me, this makes it incredibly awkward that we're going to be discussing how we're going to fund something that council has not made any direction to move forward with. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Ostashik. Councillor Nelson.
I guess just for clarification, we also haven't said that we support the museum or any other civic agencies either, and really that comes forward through budget. If there's a subsequent motion or direction given to administration that the $8,000 be included as part of the draft budget conversation, I would certainly support that as well. I look forward to having the conversation. I'm just not ready to recommend approving without seeing any context. The same if there would have been a request to recommend council approve all of the civic agencies and their asks, I wouldn't have supported that either. So to me, I think it is, because it's new, it's a little bit different than our existing ones, but I'm happy to discuss it during budget if there's a subsequent motion to this one. So thank you.
Councillor Ostashik.
Thank you again, Mr. Chair. I respectfully disagree with Councillor Nelson. The other organizations have standing operating agreements currently with the town and are asking for funding for the upcoming year. This organization does not have an operating agreement with the town. Therefore, to me, there's nothing to debate in budget discussion because there is no agreement with this organization to have in terms of an operating agreement. Thank you.
Thank you. I have myself next. I think in this case, I certainly agree with Councillor Ostashik. I think what we have to do is create some clarity in terms of our direction first, and that's by, via this chamber, if you will, and then through regular council, that we move that recommendation forward. And I think this is the time to make that initial recommendation to council. Now, that being said, to sort of speak to Councillor Nelson's concerns, when that recommendation reaches regular council, council still has the ability to really have the final say, and that's where a decision can ultimately be made. And then moreover, when it hits budget, that's where, the rubber hits the road, as I said before. So council, in the same way that we've received asks from other civic agencies, those final decisions don't come through until it goes through the budgetary process. But I respect Councillor Ostashik's opinion in this case, and I'd like to support it because I do. I think this demonstrates we're willing to support this in principle, and that, that gives administration the ability to bring it forth through the budgetary process properly. So I think there's some clarity there. I have CAO Olson next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Administration is prepared to bring this report back to the December 1st meeting. So potentially, if council requests a second draft of the budget document or isn't in a position to approve the budget this weekend, the budget could come back for approval after this report comes to December 1st. So taking some direction from council through the budget to either amend or bring back the agreement to council for decision prior to approving the budget.
So I'll actually follow up on that. So CA Olson, I'm trying to find that happy medium of propelling this forward. In this case, the mayor has made a motion that committee recommend council bring forward the disc golf course operating agreement. between the HDGA and the town at a regular council meeting for decision. If it was clearly labeled that be the December 1st meeting, then of course we could dovetail off of that and incorporate that request if it was the will of council to support that operating agreement into the budget. Perfect. So I guess then just speaking to the rest of council on that, I'm certainly willing to support the mayor's motion in this case because it still brings it to a regular council meeting. Although I may ask for a friendly amendment, or I would hope that somebody would potentially consider a friendly amendment to make it the 1st of December so that we could work that into our budgetary talks. And it's a little awkward because we are working on an operating agreement at the same time as a budgetary request, but it's nothing I think is overly complicated and we can deal with it and get it done. So that would be my opinion. Council, anyone else? Mr. Mayor.
For the sake of moving forward, I would be amenable to December 1st. If I can do that on my own, if I can just recall.
Perfect. Mr. Mayor, that reflects your intentions?
Thank you.
Excellent. Council, any further discussion on that? Seeing none, then I will call that to question. That committee recommend council bring forward the disc golf course operating agreement between the Hinton Disc Golf Association and the town of Hinton at the December 1st regular council meeting for decision. All those in favor, please indicate. And all those opposed? And opposed, we have Councillor Ostashik and Councillor Hawes, 5-2. Council, any desire to discuss anything else from that point? Or that action item, pardon me? Very good. Oh, no. Okay, seeing none, then we will move along, please. Sorry, and I just gotta move my agenda up. And that brings us to the 4th action item on page 163, the Land Management Framework Supplemental Report as presented by CAO Olson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Council received a first report on the land management framework late last month and provided some direction to refer this framework to a standing committee meeting for further discussion. Within the supplementary report, elaboration on areas of concern or that generated questions from council were included to provide clarity and promote understanding of how the framework fits into existing document trees. Mr. Vanna is present tonight for his last standing committee meeting as a staff member of the town of Hinton and is happy to assist me in answering any of council's questions on this report. Thank you.
Perfect. Council, any questions or concerns regarding the land management framework informational item?
I actually did. Looking at page 181 of 189, and I think for me as a counselor, probably speaking in examples might be the most simple way of going through this flow chart. So I want to use the example of the McMillan lands. And so if you look at a trigger for change, I think that would have been a corporate priority possibly. That was an idea that was brought forward through planning development and said, hey, there's this land, what do you guys think? And so if you follow the chart down, it goes to is budget required? And then you go over to yes, is budget available? The answer in that case would have been no. And it says budget approved through the budget process, which would then be no, which would mean it's not approved. So where I struggle is if there's an emerging opportunity and we follow this, and not we, because this is not a council document, this is how administration would handle it from what I understand of what a framework is, something like the McMillan lands could not come to council. And that to me is things like that are opportunities that I want to see and want administration to bring forward. And so if I could just understand how maybe something like that would have played out under this framework, if people are actually following along with it, that would help understand really and help whether I would ultimately support this or not. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Councillor Nelson. Mr. Vanna?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Maybe to answer that question using the same example. So if we were purchasing the McMillan lands today, and let's say we didn't have any money in the budget specifically as a line item to purchase that, that's one of the reasons that we were suggesting that a land reserve be established, so that if you had money in the reserve, you could then come to council with a request to access the reserve for the purchase of the McMillan lands. Let's say there was no money in the reserve. So administration could still come to council and say, as a funding mechanism, would council be prepared to consider a borrowing bylaw to borrow the money to buy the land? And so council could debate that issue and then make a decision on that. So one way or the other, I think it's important to understand that council's the group that has the vision, establishes where it wants to go from a land use policy direction. If it's a specific land item, council still has that ultimate direction to say, yes, we want to pursue something. If we don't have let's say the money in hand or the money in reserve, then council still has a way forward to do that or not to do that. It is still ultimately council's decision. I think administration is there to manage the process, and administration is there to then implement council's decision on whatever decision it makes.
Councillor Nelson?
Yeah, I think I agree that it would probably come to us, but if we're looking at a time where potentially you're not here anymore, which apparently is soonish, and somebody comes in and says, well, council's approved this framework, this says to me that council doesn't want to see these things out of a cycle. It's going to take us years to build up a strategic land reserve in order to fund something like the McMillan lands. And honestly, the way the flow chart is, I don't think it allows administration or encourages administration to bring creative ideas to council. And I want to see administration bring things forward without having to violate a framework that council just approved. So I love the strategic land reserve. I love that there's a little bit more structure, but unless there's some amendments and some ways that I think an average person could follow this framework and understand how something new could come, I can't support the framework. So thank you.
Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Oh, sorry, Mr. Mayor, before I think Mr. Vanna wants to respond to that directly, so I apologize. Mr. Vanna?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to answer that or to direct to that question, what I would say is that in bringing this item back to council and looking at how we do asset management, we have an asset management framework. This is a subset of that management framework. We're not asking council to approve this land management framework. Upon reflection of the discussion from last meeting, we're not asking council to approve the land management framework because it is a subset of the asset management framework. And council did not approve a land management framework, or asset management framework. That was part of the strategy. We brought it to council, explained it to council, but council did approve the policy. So in that same light, in that same method, we will bring forward to council policies that are related to land, such as the ones we already have, like encroachments, etc. So that sort of addresses that particular item, but also to speak to that item, it hasn't in the past and nor will it in the future prohibit, if you like, the idea of bringing something forward to council to say, yes, I think we should purchase this land, or no, we should sell this land, or whatever. It still will not prohibit us from the acquisition, disposition, or how we use land. This is just the framework is there for administrative clarification and how we do it, how we actually do it today, and how we have been doing it in the past.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vanna. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. With that being said, if I'm hearing correctly, that is a step. Why not put that step into the document where we added a blue rectangle box after budget approved through budget process? No, you add another blue box that says then administration comes to council to find allocated funds. If allocated funds are not put forward by council, then it's acquisition not approved. If that's going to be the process and you can exercise that will to come to council, why not put that in there? That's where I think Councillor Nelson's question is coming from, and I agree with him. Why not put that in black and white? Because I always use the same idea. Our turnover of staff could happen any day. Actually, you won't be here. I forget what date again, but why not put that in a document?
I think perhaps, Mr. Chairman, to explain the box. The box is a generic title in terms of is there budget available. So that budget could be through the budget process. That budget could be through borrowing bylaw. That budget could be through a reserve that's already there. So it's meant to be. It's a generic statement of is there money available. So if going to council and council says no, we're not going to buy it, or that type of approach is taken, we're not going to borrow the money, we're not taking it out of reserve, and it's not already allocated, then it becomes the budget is not approved through the budget process. Budget is not available, right? And then it goes back to council to make that decision. I'm just speaking to it as just for clarification.
If I may, Mr. Chair?
Please.
Thank you for that explanation. I think just maybe now it's just a bit of verbiage in that one box. If that box would have reserve, of the other two options that you alluded to in there, I think then we're all on the same page. Because right now I could see someone else coming in there or a future council reading that and thinking exactly what we're talking about right now, that it has to be through a budget process. So
Mr. Chairman, through to the mayor, just for your own clarification, we have similar kinds of flow charts for here's the development process, here's a subdivision process, etc. What happens in behind that gets attached to these particular flow charts is a step-by-step of what do you do, right? So in this box, you do this, 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 and this. In this box, you do this, 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 and this. So it's in more detail, right? So we provided you these flow charts just so you could say, or just so you could see that, yes, we do in fact have some flow charts currently in place.
Thank you. Council, any other question? Councillor Nelson.
Yeah, I don't really have a question, but I think where this ultimately isn't really a council document, but maybe it's something that as council, when we're approving policies, we should maybe think about, I know the mayor has spoken a lot about finding a way to yes. I understand this might not prohibit administration from bringing something forward, but again, talking about culture, I want us to have a culture where people are encouraged, not just not prohibited, but encouraged to bring ideas forward and bring creative solutions forward. Because over the next few years, creativity is going to be what makes municipalities survive. I think it's not going to be business as usual. So I don't necessarily have a huge issue with the document, especially understanding that it's kind of largely outside of council's purview. We're approving policies, and this is a couple layers below that. But it's tough to understand when it comes to council originally for approval. Then I feel like it should be we should put some sort of a stamp on it, especially when it's at a council meeting, or a committee meeting. So with that, I'm fine with it being approved or accepted for information. But I think going forward within the policy part, I'm going to look at putting verbiage in to really encourage our town staff to be creative and think forward. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Nelson. Council, there is still no direction or action. Mr. Mayor? Oh, Councillor Rice.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question is to administration, to Peter. So my question is, how many policies associated with this framework are going to be revised? Would you have that answer?
Yes, so in the report on page 5 of 8 on the report, which is 167, page 167. So we outline that we have one policy currently in place. That's the encroachment policy. And so we'll be bringing that. We've attached that policy to the report. So what we see, other reports. So as part of the corporate services and their financial reserve policy, they'd be bringing back a strategic land reserve policy that talks to how you set that up and how it works. We also see bringing back a dedication of municipal reserves. How do we deal with dedications? Also the unauthorized use of town land. We see that bringing that as a bylaw that allows us to actually enforce if we have unauthorized uses on town land. And also a policy to deal with disposition of surplus land policy as well. So those are typically policies that you would see in other municipalities. And so we see those bringing those back to council over the next year.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Reyes. Council. Councillor Nelson.
I'd like to seek consensus that council accept the land management framework as information.
All right, very good. Thank you, Councillor Nelson. And then just to reflect the councillor's direction, it does not include the last two words as presented.
Just run on it.
There we go. Council, there is a request for consensus on the floor that council accept the land management framework as information. Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Seeing none, then I will call that to question, that council accept the land management framework as information. All those in favor, please indicate. And that is carried unanimously. Thank you, council. Thank you, administration. And then moving on, that moves us into discussion items. And that the first and only discussion item that we have is the impacts of the new meeting schedule. And so I believe, there we go. I don't have a listed speaker in terms of bringing that up. It is listed as a discussion item. CAO Olson, were you leading off with that, or is council? I'm assuming that was a council request.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That was a council request to bring it forward. I can speak to some of what I've received as far as questions related to the changes to the meeting schedule. That includes the delivery of minutes to council, given that there's a month between regular council meetings where you would see those minutes to approve. If there's anything that can be addressed in the procedure bylaw or review committee that supports, I think that's maybe a practice outside of that bylaw, but as well, another item that was sent to me was regarding chairing of meetings. So currently the deputy chairs the standing committee meetings, that's 2 meetings a month, and the mayor would chair the regular meeting, which is only 1. So those are 2 of the things that hopefully that supports some discussion tonight, things that I've received today.
Perfect. Thank you. Council, it's open for discussion. So I am looking for anyone. Councillor Nelson.
See if I can knock one off here. Direct administration to circulate draft minutes to council no later than 72 hours following a council meeting or special meeting. If I can speak to it, the 72 hours is completely arbitrary. I don't know what the right number is, and I would really look to administration for that. I know I've struggled at remembering what we did a month ago when it comes time to approving minutes. It's also a little bit tricky when citizens are saying, hey, what did you guys approve last night? or what did you approve last week? And until we've seen those draft minutes, it's hard to recall that. And I know every once in a while we're out here taking pictures with our cell phones of the screens, which I don't know is the most professional things to do, or we're kind of learning about some of them through the council highlights. So I think it's better governance if we can review those sooner rather than later after the meeting, so that we're all kind of fresh and clear. So, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Nelson. There is, I think, as the chair, a bit of an implied request to administration there for some input. So I'll turn to the CAO to comment on that if possible, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't see too much issue with the 72 hours piece. That's 3 days following the whatever meeting. The one piece that I would seek to, I guess, not so much clarify, but remind council of is that discussion regarding the minutes would be reserved for the meeting at which they're approved. So we would just need to keep that in mind at following standing committee meetings. They would not be included in the agenda and up for discussion.
Councillor Nelson, do you have any comment or concerns on that?
No.
Perfect. Council, Mr. Mayor?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I really like this concept. The only thing now I'm thinking about, I would like to see this part of the procedural bylaw. So I want to support this, but maybe for the next, give it 6 months, 8 months, because otherwise it's an ongoing motion and we might have a procedural bylaw that's different and we have to rescind this just to clean it up. We do this for the next 8 months or until the procedural bylaw has it in, I'd be more comfortable. Otherwise, it'll be one of the many things we were trying to clean up a long time ago, having these outstanding motions, right? So if Councillor Nelson is amenable to a timeline, I would like to suggest for the next 6 months.
Councillor Nelson?
Yeah, I'm trying to think if there's a way to use a timeline that's tied to the document rather than tied to a timeline.
If I may,
Mr. Mayor.
Maybe no timeline, but until it's addressed inside the procedural bylaw. I don't know if I heard a few words there.
Until the procedural bylaw is updated and approved.
I'll hand it over to
Until
Councillor.
at which time the council procedural bylaw update has been approved, yeah. If everybody's up for a friendly amendment on that.
Okay, Councillor Nelson, you did initiate it, so we'll look to you to make sure that that's still friendly to your initial intent.
Very friendly, thank you.
Mr. Mayor?
I think it's Councillor Waz now.
Councillor Wong.
As friendly as it gets.
Perfect. All right. Council, then we do have a direction on the table. Is there any discussion on that? Councillor Eustache.
Mr. Chair, just in terms of the timing of it, 72 hours is maybe not the best way to word it, and should maybe be business days or something like that. I'm just thinking on the occasion that a meeting might happen on a Thursday, the minutes would have to be out by Sunday night kind of thing, so.
Thank you. Councillor Nelson?
As we seem very highly amenable, if that can be changed to 3 business days, I would.
Very good. Thank you, Council. Good discussion so far. I appreciate how amenable everyone is. Is there any further discussion on that piece? Councillor Race, was that a hand? No? Okay. Last chance hotel then, Council. Seeing no further discussion, we will call that to question. Direct administration to circulate draft minutes to council no later than 3 business days following council meeting or special meeting until the procedural bylaw is updated and approved. All those in favor, please indicate. And any opposed? Seeing none, Chris. That is carried unanimously 7-0. Thank you very much. It's still open for discussion, council. Councillor Nelson?
This is more of a question. When it comes to council reporting, I don't know if it's something that requires a motion, but is that something that may be wise to either move to a standing committee or allow opportunities at each meeting for council reporting? I just look at our council reporting is oftentimes very rushed already at the end of a regular council meeting, and that's with 2 a month. So I think maybe looking at an adjustment to that could make a little bit better and less rushed. So again, I don't know if it's a direction thing, but I'd love to hear what council kind of lies on that one. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Haas.
Yeah, and I thought about that, but you know what? I think having that at a standing meeting may also be a better option, because there might be a little bit more opportunity for questions back and forth than maybe we have at a regular meeting, because we typically just go from person to person, you know. And I think at a standing meeting, there might be some more back and forth, and maybe offer more information to councillors that may have questions to some of the committees we're on. So I would see that a better option at a committee meeting than it is a regular anyway. So thank you.
Yeah, and I'll speak to this. I certainly agree. I think really that time could be carved into any of those meetings. We certainly know that there's been some time-sensitive matters that have popped up in our various committees, whether it be regular or whether it be standing. And I think having the opportunity to have those discussions amongst council, regardless of regular standing, would be opportune. So I certainly would support that. Council, Councillor Haas?
And just on that note too, is some of our, depending on what committee, but some of our committees, you know, it might be a long time before you're actually reporting on it, where we have more standings. So yeah, I think it, you know, maybe not both standings, but definitely one of the standings for sure. But that just makes, I think, a lot more sense, honestly, with the change in meeting schedules. So thank you.
Thank you. Council, any further discussion on that point? Councillor Haas?
Do we have to, I guess, looking at the agenda prep, is that something that would just take as tonight's discussion, or do we need a direction on that, or how does that work if we want to change? Because that's that's a significant change from what we deviate from what we normally do.
Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll only speak for myself, and maybe Councillor Nelson has something to say. I think having the discussion and making sure that the procedural bylaw committee gets some input regarding some of the bigger changes, because that's a big change. Potentially the mayor chairing one of the standing was another topic. Like getting some feedback before we come back with something that might be totally off base, right? So I'm comfortable waiting until I think it's March 31st is our deadline, I'm correct, to have that finalized. But if there's a will of council to choose something to implement immediately, then I guess we have that discussion. I'm comfortable waiting another 4.5, 5 months. Thank you.
Councillor Nelson.
I think I really like the concept of fewer meetings. I think it has the opportunity to result in better governance. And I think if there's some things that we can start now, I would rather go down that path. I don't want to see us at every regular council meeting really pushing the clock, rushing to the end, or starting to extend, because then I think it kind of undermines the concept of where we're trying to go. And I really don't want to see us put 4 months into a council procedural bylaw, and then, you know, come March, we've found that we're putting too many things at regular council meetings, and then we go and switch it back and have to kind of reset that committee. So to me, if it requires a direction, I'd happily make it tonight. But I'd rather see us open up the council reporting to actually every meeting. And again, it just gives us the opportunity to report back to our committees, create that two-way dialogue, help our committees share news and updates and requests. There's a lot happening, especially with COVID. All of our committees are doing a lot of different things, and there can be a huge time gap between reporting. There already sometimes were with the months that we had off. So yeah, I'll kind of see where it lays up, but if it requires a direction, I'll happily make a direction tonight on it. So thank you.
I guess I'll speak to that to follow up, having no other councillors in queue. I certainly would support the all meetings direction if it was made tonight. I think, again, it's giving us that chance to have more regular reporting and more regular discussion. Thank you. Councillor Nelson?
I would like to make a direction that the agenda include council reporting at all regular and standing committee meetings. I think I've spoken to it enough. I think this will be great, and if we need to tweak it for the procedural bylaw, we'll have had a couple months of testing it to help educate that process. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Nelson. Council, any discussion on the direction that's on the floor? Seeing none, then I will call it to question that the agenda include council reporting that all regular and standing committee meetings. Okay, we're going to re-clarify that, Council, that the direction on the floor that the agenda include council reporting at all regular and standing committee meetings. All those in favor, please indicate. And any opposed? Seeing none, that is carried unanimously. Councillor Rice, I just want to confirm, you voted in favor of that last direction? Thank you.
Yes, sir. Yes,
Thank you, ma'am. Okay, then that takes care of that particular item. Oh, Councillor Rice.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. I do have a concern with the word urgent under additional information. Would I bring that up as a discussion item now or wait till we get to additional information?
Sorry, if I may just clarify that. Councillor Rice, are you talking about in like impacts due to our meeting schedule, or are you talking about an urgent item for tonight?
No, I'm just talking about the word urgent in regards to urgent matters. So would I bring that up under discussion items or wait till we get to additional information? I can give you an example if you would like.
Please.
So when we say urgent matters, to me, urgent is life or death. Urgent is you will need surgery within the next hour. So, and if I had something urgent to talk to council about, I'm certainly not going to wait till the end of the meeting. So I'm just wondering if we could maybe, you know, take a look at that word urgent.
Councillor Rice, the discussion item at hand is the impacts of the new meeting schedule. I'm wondering if we could bring that up perhaps under another discussion item or with the agenda prep committees. I just don't feel like that's in line with this particular agenda item. I'm certainly willing to hear any concerns from council if they think that that's an improper ruling. But again, I just don't think it's in line with the impacts of the new meeting schedule.
Certainly. Oh, no, I understand that. I just needed to ask that question.
Unless I've misunderstood, and that's why I'll turn to Councillor Ostashik.
Yeah, if Councillor Rice has concerns about the urgent matters from council that's generally on the standing committee agendas, I'm happy to hear it and discuss it right now.
Okay.
It is affected by the change in scheduling because now we have 2 standings in a row and then nothing and then a regular before we get back to another standing. So it could very well be impacted, and I'd like to hear what Councillor Rice has to say.
Okay, sounds good. Then we will deal with it right now. Thank you, Councillor Ostashik. Thank you, Councillor Rice. Councillor Rice, if you would, please.
Okay, well, I'm just looking at that word urgent. Are we saving urgent topics, urgent information till the very end of our meeting? Or should that, you know, what does urgent mean to council?
Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll give my, interpretation of it. It just gives an opportunity for council to bring up something with some formality to potentially have a direction, right? Now, as Councillor Stashik alluded to, with the change of schedule, maybe like we're changing the reporting, we maybe change when urgent matters are. The word urgent, I would leave that discussion potentially with the procedural bylaw committee. It falls in there, and then we can look at that. But if there is something regarding urgent matters as a concept right now, we could treat it the same as we just did with the prior motion. So again, whether that's the will of council to do tonight, to have only 2, which is the second and third week and not a regular, maybe that's good, maybe that's not. But I'm content with the urgent matters section because it allows us to bring something forward.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess I will speak to it too, and I'm actually also going to take a moment to extend an apology to Councillor Rice. I don't think I understood the intention of your initial discussion item, So I apologize for trying to categorize your item within a different discussion item. So I think I have a little bit more clarity on what you were trying to achieve. I think in this case too, we can always use the adoption of the agenda as a time to bring forward any urgent items faster in the agenda. I suppose that's an option too. Not that I think we couldn't look at moving around urgent matters or anything like that, but we also have that power during the agenda setting part of the meeting to bring any important or urgent items forward. If they are truly, like you said, Councillor Race, urgent or life or death. So, Councillor Race, sorry, did you want to?
I'm good, Mr. Chair, and no apology necessary at all. I'm good.
Councillor Ostashik?
So my thoughts are pretty much, thank you, Mr. Chair. My thoughts are pretty much in line with those of Mayor Michaels, and that if there's going to be an opportunity for council to do reporting at every meeting, perhaps there is an emergent issue that council wants to bring to the rest of council's attention. And so I'd be in favor of seeing a motion similar to the last one to allow urgent matters to be addressed at each meeting too, regular and standing.
Councillor Ostashik,
I'd be prepared to make that motion if we could bring up Councillor Nelson's last motion though, because it should be worded pretty similarly. That the agenda include urgent matters from council at all regular and standing committee meetings.
We could put the prior to agenda, please. Councillor Ostashik, does that reflect?
Yep, very good. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. Council, we do have a direction on the floor that the agenda include all urgent matters from the council at all regular council and standing committee meetings. Any discussion on that? Seeing none, then we will call that to question. All those in favor? And any opposed? Seeing none, that is carried unanimously. Thank you, Council. Thank you, Councillor Race. Thank you, Councillor Ostashik. Do we have any more discussion points? Councillor Nelson?
I think we're probably good with this one for the meantime, since it's already just weird, but with being one regular month, I guess what's the council's hope or expectation with things like administrative inquiries and notices of motion? Especially notices of motion, they're made at a regular to appear at the following regular. And so if there's something that a member of council doesn't get on an agenda, it could actually be almost 3 months before it goes on to an agenda as it currently stands. So it's a philosophical thing that I'm not sure that as the procedural bylaw update committee, we come back with something real close without a little bit of discussion and understanding. Just kind of wondering where council stands on that. If we do it a timeline that has to be done in writing X days before, I have no concept at all.
Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've given this some thought and obviously opening it up to all council members. But my train of thought is to make that process extremely seamless, meaning notices of motions can be made at any council meeting and you can pick when that comes back. Because right now it would be 2 weeks, but it would give that discretion to that person. So it could be done at a standing, which is not limited. You're not, to my understanding, you're allowed to do it, right, at a standing, to say that it'll come back at another meeting. Right now, the way it's worded, it's kind of confusing, but through the procedural bylaw committee, that would be my intention, to give it extreme flexibility. So every councillor knows, hey, that didn't go on the agenda. I'm making a notice of motion and I want it to come back at whatever date. Simple, clean, and I'm looking for other feedback, but that was sort of my train of thought. Thank you.
Councillor Nelson, are you interested in responding at all? No. Councillor Ostashik.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I'd speak to it too, and I actually had the council procedure bylaw open when Councillor Nelson brought this up because I was looking at exactly that. Because I have concerns about it too and the timing of it. And I've always had a bit of a different interpretation of notices of motion than has kind of been the accepted consensus. And the accepted consensus has kind of been that it's supposed to happen at a regular meeting, but in reading through the member submissions section of the council procedure bylaw, it actually doesn't say that it has to be at a regular meeting. So to me, it could happen, the notice of motion could realistically happen at any meeting, I would think, because it doesn't define that it has to be at a regular. It defines when the motion comes forward for decision or discussion, but it doesn't define when it needs to happen. So to me, that means that a notice of motion can happen at any scheduled council meeting, whether it's standing or regular. So I don't know if we need something that defines that, like a motion or a direction or just an understanding or what we need to have that clarified. Because I do have the same concern that if we're only going to allow them at regular, it can be a long time before that motion actually comes for decision. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Ostashik. Council, any further discussion on that point? Councillor Nelson?
Yeah, I think the key part is that it states that the notice of motion appears at the next regular. So the notice of motion is the next regular. The actual motion then isn't for another month after that. So it's a cumbersome one. So I think where Mayor Michaels is at, and I think we'll bring something back that's at least clear. Thank you.
Councillor Watt.
Yeah, and if you're looking for any additional input, I think there needs to be some flexibility considering the new meeting schedule and obviously some clarity. So whatever the committee brings back that can add to those aspects would be well received by me.
And I'll go in next. I'll chime in. I certainly agree, dovetailing off that point from Councillor Watt. I think if we're going to reduce the number of scheduled meetings down to 3, I think we have to be much more flexible and willing to utilize the special meeting as a tool to get policy dealt with at the council level. I think the one thing I've tried explaining to citizens in the community is that it certainly is an efficiency measure, but in no way does it prevent us from doing any business that we need to do in that 4th week as necessary. So I think that's something that's quite important that we consider, because I have to admit initially, and I was working, and I apologize, and I certainly do support the will of council. I was a little concerned when I saw that we had dropped down to the 3 meetings, but in having a discussion with the mayor and him having that clarification with me, I certainly support it moving forward, but we do have to take advantage of that special meeting as needed. Thank you. Councillor Ostashik.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I guess it's just a question for the rest of council, and it's regarding just going back to the notices of motion. Is council just content then to wait till we get the procedure bylaw update, or is there something we want to do in the interim so there's an understanding? Or?
Councillor Nelson?
I think potentially the agenda prep committee will probably just have to be maybe more flexible with requests of member submissions, because it's only once it's been denied to go on that. So I think having more flexibility now and then potentially tightening that up after the bylaw like that, it's really tough to even know what to do with it in the meantime. It might just have to be a little bit ad hoc, and because again, you can interpret our procedural bylaw in many, many ways. So.
And I guess just for myself to speak to that too, I would agree. I think working with requests from specific councillors and the agenda prep committee, that's probably our best way to deal with it until we get our procedural hammered out. And that being said, if there's any concerns or any division, we can certainly address that as a council, I think. Council, any further, Councillor Nelson?
Upon a bit of review too on this, one of the parts where I have a bit of concern is around public hearings, in that we've already had a little bit of pressure to move quickly in unanimous consent, and because public hearings are generally tied in with regular council meetings and they require 3 readings, I wonder if there's, some way that we can achieve some consistency with the process that isn't always calling special meetings, or potentially calling special meetings as part of standing, but just trying to figure out a way that we could ensure transparency, good governance, and expediency when it comes to public hearings. And potentially my headspace is that if there's a public hearing, we utilize the 3rd standing and consistently call a special meeting at the 3rd standing if there's a public hearing. Otherwise, if we're calling special meetings on an ad hoc basis for things like public hearings, I think it's a little bit tricky from a consistency and transparency standpoint. So just any thoughts around that? Certainly I have lots of questions, but not a lot of answers on that one.
Council, any thoughts? I'm gonna look to administration on this one. Administration, do you have any comments on that?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't have any comments. Same, I guess, kind of questions, and look to the review and discussion between the committee members for the procedure bylaw review to take a look at what's possible. Apologies, I don't have any comments.
Councilor Nelson. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think it ties into the last conversation we had, and I think it's Councilor Nelson, myself, and Sandra are meeting tomorrow, and we can discuss this further. It's finding that flexibility. Why not be able to have a public hearing anytime, hypothetically? Because there have been many times, the public hearing day, we have to do 2 weeks of advertising, and we've struggled probably 4 or 5 times during this term for lining it up correctly. Well, if it's allowed, and that's the part I don't know through the MGA and whatever, we can fix that. We can have that conversation with Sandra. Is if it is possible, let's bring that flexibility to council for that also. And seeing that we have 3 meetings, it's just continuing that consistency of having that flexibility. So I don't know if Sandra has anything now to comment on that, but that would be something that we will discuss tomorrow. I can assure you if there's nothing that comes from it tonight.
All right. Seeing none then, council, is there any further discussion on this item? Councilor Nelson.
I'd like to actually put forward a direction and see where the conversation goes. I'd like to direct administration to bring remuneration policy number 052 to council for amendment, whereas all members of council including the mayor see a reduction in monthly honorarium of $200. Of $200. And if I can speak to it, I know I've had a couple of these conversations with members of council. We're taking an extra week without any meetings, and that means we're not having to go out and seek public feedback, public engagement. We're not spending our weekends prepping for an agenda. And ultimately, if we're going to be doing a more efficient job and a little bit less work in the long run, we're asking a lot of people in the community and council and administration. Everybody's going through some challenges right now, and I think if we're going to do a little bit less work and invest a little bit less time into council meetings and preparation, then I think that should be reflected in our honorarium as well. Thank you.
Okay, council, any discussion on this? CAO.
Just a point of clarification, it's remuneration, not remuneration.
It's the worst word ever.
And then I have Councilor Race. Councilor Race.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do respect Councillor Nelson's wish to save the citizens money. He and I have had this discussion, and I feel by us not having one meeting a month, we're saving the community $800 a month, $9,600 a year. So right now, I think it's just a little bit too premature to enter into this remuneration discussion. So I will not support this. Thank you.
Council, Mr. Mayor, then Councillor Wall.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess my question to administration. One, is the remuneration committee coming back to council in 2021?
Mr. Chair, through to Mayor Michaels, I would have to double check the policy for the exact date, but it does come back before the next election. So the spring, I believe, May perhaps, but I don't know the exact date, but it is before the next election.
Councillor Wall?
Yeah, I guess philosophically, I agree with where Councillor Nelson's going, but I guess I'd pose to him. What happens in the months when a special meeting is called that requires a fourth meeting?
Councillor Nelson?
Yeah, we still get paid meeting fees for those meetings, but the intent is to have fewer meetings. If the thought process is we're gonna have special meetings most months, then we wouldn't have reduced the meeting schedule. So again, I think some of these changes are in line with the reduction of meetings, so thank you.
Okay, I have myself, oh, sorry, actually, I'll let Councillor Haas go first. Okay. Right, thank you, Councillor Haas. I would certainly want to have a look at the policy. I agree in principle with the concept of, if we're not in chambers as often, then there should be a reduction in costs to the taxpayer. That's a pretty easy to understand principle. But I think then you get into the fine line of debating, well, isn't that already happening if a councillor isn't claiming their meeting fees for a particular meeting versus the honorarium is supposed to reflect a councillor carrying out their duties, not just at a particular meeting, but more so throughout the month as a whole during the off hours. And then ultimately the other point that I need to check in the actual policy, and I haven't had a chance, is, and this is the most important one for me, is the role in the remuneration committee, which is members of the community and what they advise moving forward. And for myself, that's always been the strongest factor in the remuneration policy, because you have that third voice of outside citizens who are separate from council, bringing forth that recommendation to say, what should the next council be paid and how should they be paid? And case in point, the biggest case study was, for myself, was the mayor's position. I had advocated very strongly to that committee when they had interviewed us that the mayor puts in a full-time a set of hours and should be, paid out essentially like a full-time position because they are putting in that sort of time. I'm not against it, but I would like to have some time to work with the policy first, I think is the best way of putting it. So if there's any way that direction could sort of reflect that time, I would be in support of that. CAO Olson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This relates to your comments, and just to provide some clarification to council on the policy. I do have a copy in my binder here. There is no date set for when that review is to take place prior to the election, just that it does in the months prior. Typically, the changes that the committee recommend come to council, but they are not implemented until the next council takes their places. So I'm not sure if that answers some of your questions, but I offer that.
Councillor Haas.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. And I guess that's where I was at. I was more, we talked about some of the remuneration, whatever you say, remuneration previously, that's a dumb word, but anyway. And it was my understanding that waiting for the committee was to get their recommendations before making any changes to this. So, but on that note, I've also, as Councillor McCune mentioned, I mean, I'm also, open to considering it, but there is more to just meetings that we do as councillors. And I mean, we may do other things outside of the meeting types of roles, or obviously, that we play in the community. So I don't foresee our work being any less potentially. We're, as Councillor Race mentioned too, I mean, we're not claiming for those meetings, which is saving money at the same time. I mean, my thing about is looking at the amounts we get per meeting, which I'm hoping the committee at some point will look at and see just the percentages, you know, because my concern has always been the 4 hours and then we go into 15, 20 minutes and then we double that amount. And that's a bit concerning for me, but not so much this particular part of the remuneration. So I'd have to know a little bit more information as well, and because I do see cost savings in the long run having that extra meeting. So thank you.
I have Councillor Nelson, then Councillor Wall, then myself.
I think just clarification on the committee part. We've made multiple changes to our remuneration policy to clean it up and to make it more sensible. And ultimately, when that committee made the recommendation to council, it was based on 4 meetings a month and a meeting schedule that's been consistent for years and years and years. So I would argue the opposite. If we're saying we're getting paid this much because we're doing this amount of work, if we're taking work off the table, the committee, we're kind of going against what the committee was basing their recommendation on. So I think there's 2 sides to that for sure. So and ultimately this just brings the policy back to council. It doesn't tie us to anything specifically. The last time it came back, there was talk about how we did council reporting, and we ultimately removed that from the policy before approving it. So it doesn't bind us to anything, but I think it's an important conversation and philosophy to have. So thank you.
Councillor Wall.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, and I think a lot of the things brought up tonight merit some further consideration and discussion, but I think it should be done by the Remuneration Committee. And on the flip side of what Councillor Nelson said, if you look at it, tonight we had 182 pages to read. That's, if there's 1 week where we don't have 182 pages to read and consult on, that is a lot less work. But again, on the flip side, we don't consider paying less remuneration monthly during the summer when we only have 2 meetings a month, or June when we only have 3, or September when we only have 3. So I just think trying to prorate it at $200 a meeting, I think gets a little tough to manage with the math, but I think it's definitely something that needs to be considered by the committee coming in when there's a full term of council at 3 meetings a month.
Thank you, Councillor Wall. I have myself in queue next, and just to clarify, I think my own personal opinion on this, I'm very happy to look at this, to look at a reduction. I think that's reasonable. I think though the type of meeting I would rather have this discussion in before it comes to regular is in a standing, because I don't think we're going to get the level of discussion we should have out of this, because there's a lot of good valid viewpoints people have brought up around the table. I think I'd rather have that meeting in this standing first before it would come to a regular council, so that I could hear everybody's opinion on this, give it due consideration before we bring it to regular council. But in principle, absolutely, I support it. I just need to hear from around the table first. Councillor Wall.
Just on a related topic, a question for admin. You said there's no set dates to have this. Do we know when we should be considering forming a committee to have them look at this? I don't know how long the review period is.
CAO?
Thank you. I'm afraid I don't have an answer to that right now. That's something that administration would be looking at early on in 2021. I'm not familiar with how it's been done previously, so I need to take a look at what administration followed. I did take a quick look at the policy, and it didn't give any time frame or steps or how that sort of thing. I need to maybe dwell on that just a little bit before bringing something back to council.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I echo the same sentiments as the chair, Councillor Magoon. I'd like to have this discussion at standing again. I'm trying to do quick math on the fly. Like, this is 12% reduction for councillors, but there is more work in the other weeks. We'll have longer agendas and more topics, and we're going to go out to the public more because the quantity is the same. It's just spread out differently, right? So it's a weird equation. So tonight I wouldn't support tonight to just, hey, let's just take 12%. It affects mine differently. But I think a further conversation, finding what's fair, analyzing the overall impact, sure, but on the fly to just chop $200 a month for remuneration that you can argue, there's arguments on both sides. I'd ask to let's discuss this at a future standing. It would be my intent. Thank you.
Councillor Haas.
So just for clarification, because this is a new system, obviously a new schedule. So we currently have our standing committee this evening. So we will be receiving when the agenda for our next regular, would we be receiving it on the Friday, giving us the week to, or it'd be the Friday before the regular? Before the regular. Okay. Okay, thank you. Which, well, if I may, I mean, that changes things a little bit because, I mean, we are going to have, which I'm kind of concerned, may bring up another, but because as Ryan Michael said, we may have more to consider on regular meeting. And we're going to have less time to review it and everything. Well, the same amount of time, but more, potentially more. Whereas that's where I guess, and this may be just my oversight on it in the first initial conversation of it, is I guess my assumption is that we would be having that agenda for the regular and having that week to go over it, or at least longer period of time in that week off to review potentially more decisions to be made. I guess, so that's where I was at, is that I didn't feel that we would be actually, sure, we're taking a week off for meetings, but preparing for a meeting, that's where I was at. Potentially we'd be preparing for it more. So I guess that brings up, I guess for me, a little bit of a concern, because we are going to have to double the potentially the amount in a regular with the same amount that we have right now in a single regular. And so I would then, at the same time then, on that note, is I would not necessarily, we would definitely have to be looking at this, because that's going to be potentially a lot of work in a 40-year period to do to prepare for that next regular that might make up for what is up on the board or on the screen right now in regards to the website. So just some thoughts. Thank you.
Councillor Nelson.
Yeah, and I think again, it's the changes to regular council that also kind of make it why I just put it at a regular council meeting. So this is the challenge. So if it comes back to standing, the earliest that we could make that decision and those changes would be early in 2021 if it makes an agenda, and could, potentially, because of our lack of meetings, the change in remuneration, if we don't make that decision in 2 weeks, it probably isn't worth making during our term, because we're getting, we're talking about 3 months before that decision can be made, if the bylaw comes back. So I'm going to leave it as it is. I have a feeling it's probably not going to pass. If somebody wants to make a subsequent one around standing, or potentially, and I would look to other members of council who've been here longer, I don't know if we make recommendations to that committee or not, or if they seek feedback from council. So I'm going to let the motion stand as it is, and it'll be what it'll be. But I just don't want to kick it too far down the curb and be, in my opinion, collecting more meeting fees than we're earning based on the changes that we've already made. Thank you.
Council, any further discussion on that? Councillor Race.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I hope this doesn't sound frivolous, but what do we do if a councillor requests or gets permission to take a vacation for 2 months? Do they forfeit their remuneration for those 2 months? What if a councillor is sick, is ill in the hospital, and misses X number of meetings, 7? Do they forfeit? So just something else to for consideration. I just think we're being a little too premature on this one right now. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Race. And I apologize on missing you, that one. I did have your name written down. I just messed up. Council, any further discussion on this? Seeing none, then I will call this to question. that council direct administration to bring remuneration policy number 052 to council for amendment, whereas all members of council, including the mayor, see a reduction in monthly honorarium of $200. All those in favor, please indicate. All those opposed? And that is defeated 2-5. And against, oh yeah, we could do, yeah, there we go. Nelson and Magoon 4. Councillor Nelson?
So I didn't want to ask Councillor Haas during that agenda item because it was kind of loosely related, but understand we're talking about reduction of meetings. Is what you were asking, are you potentially asking if it's possible to have a longer timeline ahead of each regular council meeting?
If I may.
Please.
Yeah, I guess that's my thought is we would have longer, being as how we have a potentially larger agenda on it because we only have one regular. I mean, standings we're going to have roughly considering the same amount, but a regular we're going to have those 2 standings and then everything discussed and anything else. And my thought is that we would have it earlier than the Friday to give us the more time to review and to do some homework on it and get it, because we're looking at potentially double the amount of stuff in a same period of time that we have with one meeting. So I would like potentially to see, if we could have instead, at least on the Wednesday versus the Friday, have access to that agenda and start having, 2 extra days. Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Haas. I have the mayor up next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Councillor Haas, for saying that, and thank you, Councillor Nelson, for bringing it back to the floor. And I think is that we'll have to get administration's input because we wanted to create that flow, give administration like a week to do stuff. But if we could have our agenda prep committee meetings for regulars on the Monday, and then the agenda could be on Wednesday, then we have those 2 extra days, as Councillor Haas alluded to be able to go over bigger packages because they are going to be larger, and that would be ideal. So either that is through the procedural bylaw committee, and I don't know if there's any comments from administration, but that would be my target also. So thank you for saying that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
CAO Olson.
Just a couple of comments. I think that moving to the Wednesday is potentially okay. As far as our timelines go, moving back from that could pose some issues. We're looking at standing committee meeting and having the part of the intention of the change is to provide some opportunity for administration to look at what we're bringing forward, incorporate some of council's changes, and not be flipping reports to meetings back to back, so that we're diligent in what we're bringing forward. I think moving it to Wednesday doesn't potentially cause any issues. It's only a couple of days. Still provides us the opportunity to review the reports that are coming forward and to get them in an information package. I would request some time to just review that with the team and make sure that we're able to meet that, if that's okay with council.
Perfect. I have a number of councillors in queue, beginning with myself, then councillors Nelson, Haas, and Ostashik. I certainly would support getting those packages on Wednesday. I think my reasons are centered more on public engagement and transparency. It may not seem like a big deal, but getting those packages on a Friday and then having a council meeting on a Tuesday, and whereas I certainly respect administration's requests and time crunches and putting packages together, it really does limit the public feedback portion of a given agenda item. So if we can look at trying to establish, some kind of happy middle ground, if it is available, I certainly would appreciate that. And I think the community would appreciate that too. And it gives more time for public discussion on items that are going to hit the agenda floor. So, Councillor Nelson.
Yeah, just a couple notes. I've added this to our list of many things for the procedural bylaw, which we're doing a pretty good job keeping track at. And our current procedural bylaw requires that the agendas are sent by the Friday. So if ever administration and the agenda prep committee had a good meeting or it made sense to bring it a bit early, there's nothing saying that we couldn't test it, because we can always go earlier than that. So I think there's a testing opportunity if we wanted to, and I think it's a great thing. I'm happy that it was brought up in a different manner, but I think it's a really important consideration. So thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Haas?
Yeah, and I mean, whether it's Wednesday, or I do appreciate the fact that there was that reasoning to give administration that extra time, but I just, look at our previous, and I mean, when that agenda hits my computer, it's, running for 4 days to get up to speed on it and everything. So I just try to do a marathon rather than a sprint and stuff in other areas. So it just, if a day or two is amenable to administration to get that, still, giving that due diligence to the reports and stuff, that would be much greatly appreciated. I think just with the magnitude of the meetings that we're looking at. So
thank you, Councillor Haas. Councillor Ostashik?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Understanding some of the concerns that have come forward there. These are the concerns that were brought to the table when we talked about reducing meeting schedules down to one regular a month, and some of the challenges that it would instill. The unfortunate reality is there's not less work. We're just taking the same amount of work and compressing it into 3 meetings a month instead of 4. Now that just doesn't fall on council either, though. That falls on administration too. They have twice as much work that they have to do to prepare for the 1 regular meeting of council per month. So if administration's comfortable in rolling it ahead, I'm okay with that, but I would really want to make sure that administration is very comfortable moving it forward. The whole intent of having that week gap was so that administration had enough time to properly prepare reports, vet them, make sure that council's input was in standing committee meetings was reflected in those reports. And if that was the intent, I want to make sure that that's upheld. So if that means that the agenda continues to come out on Friday, I'm okay with that. If it can be moved ahead a day or two without any negative impact to the result, I'm okay with that too, but I want to make sure there's no negative impact. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ostashik. Council, any further discussion? Councillor Nelson?
Like one more direction, just for the fun of it. Or I guess I'll seek consensus that the mayor chairs all council meetings and special meetings unless absent.
Did you want to speak to that, Councillor Nelson?
Yeah, so council meetings in our procedure bylaw are defined as standing, regular, all of those things, but special meetings are not included in that. So that would include regular and standing and special. I look at the progress we've been making over the last few months. And I think a consistency in chairing would be very beneficial to our overall efficiency and productivity with our meetings, whether that's how council's performing, how administration's performing. If we're looking at, we're reducing meetings, we're going to have to be efficient. We're gonna have to do better work in meetings than we have in the past. And I think having the mayor chair all of the meetings unless absent makes the most sense. One of the things that was brought up is that the mayor chair is regular and the second standing, but then we have deputies who are chairing almost never and aren't going to get that experience to be able to chair successfully. To me, it's about good governance and good meetings and good processes, and I think this gives us the best shot versus the mayor only chairing a third of our meetings. So thank you.
Thank you. I have myself up next, and then Councillor Ostashik. And in this case, I think I very strongly disagree. I think in terms of building capacity, that is an important part of any organization. We have to understand that we are a fluid council between this council and the next. But that being said, the reality is some of these councillors may eventually want to run for the position of mayor, and so on and so forth through the years. And I don't think it does any justice to a potential councillor to deny them the opportunity to improve themselves as a chair if they don't have that skill and they don't have that ability to practice. Now, that being said, if there's a problem with the way deputy mayors conducting themselves or their effectiveness as a chair, I think that it's up to the rest of council to bring that to the mayor's attention so that they can have that discussion as a council and sort of see how they're going to work through that process. But again, I think in terms of capacity building, it's better for the community to ensure that all folks who participate on any side of this table have the chance to get that experience. Councillor Ostashik.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, this one I'm going to speak against as well, and pretty passionately for many of the same reasons as Councillor Magoon. I think it's important that the members of council have an opportunity to learn to chair a meeting and to chair a meeting appropriately, whether it's because they have aspirations to continue in municipal governance or even chairing any other type of committee that they might belong to in the future. And the other benefit that I see of having deputy mayor chairing the standing committee meetings is it gives the mayor an opportunity to participate a little bit more fully than they do when they're fulfilling their role as chair. As we all know, the chairs can't make motions, can't make directions. They're just simply chairing the meeting. So that gives the mayor the opportunity to be able to participate in seeking consensus from council, to provide direction and participate more fully. So I think the benefits of having a deputy mayor chairing the standing committees and continuing to chair the standing committees outweighs some of the drawbacks. So this one I'm going to be speaking against. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Race.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think we have to sit back and remember that municipal councils are made up of everyday normal citizens. These are not people who have come out of university with political degrees, who know Robert's rules off by heart. So I agree with Councillor Magoon, Councillor Albert. I will not support this motion. We are everyday people and everybody should be afforded the opportunity to be chairing a meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I fall in between for this one. I don't like the idea of the mayor chairing all the meetings. I do see the value in some, but seeing that there are more standing committee meetings, I do think traditionally the mayor is the chair of the regular meetings. With this new format, I do think, and I'd be even okay if there's no appetite for this term, but I really believe the mayor should be chairing the majority of the meetings, like in any community. That is the person who's elected the chief executive officer for the community. They have, I think they're challenged with more responsibility. And now we're asking rotating elected officials to chair more than the mayor. We're fundamentally did a big swing. All the meetings is too much because there's so much value in learning, but I do believe the first or the second standing committee meeting should be chaired by the mayor. Because let's be frank, and let's use an example of a future council. There are some chairs that are just better than others. It's a simple fact, right? And generally, with the consistency of having one person doing it for the entire term, they will generally be a better chair, right? That's the philosophy overall. So I wouldn't support this, but I would support one of the standing committee meetings being chaired by the mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have myself up next. I think one of the areas where I see an issue with this as well that I think is worth mentioning is with public hearings. So if the deputy mayor is responsible for chairing public hearings, and I've certainly been through a couple that were, to describe them as hairy would perhaps be, a nicety, to have that person only getting the experience necessary to handle that hot environment with one meeting a month, it's not enough. Just quite frankly, it's not enough. And I guess respectfully, but still supporting the decision of council previously, at minimum, you're going to need a couple of meetings a month in order to get that experience. If you want the mayor to still have more meetings than that or to chair an equivalent amount, then you need to seriously consider revisiting the motion up to 4. And that's the solution I would put forward. I will absolutely respect the decision of council either way, but I would hold that 1 meeting a month for a deputy mayor to be able to handle those situations is not enough experience. So if that's the sticking point, if that's what somebody was sort of sticking on, I would say then we need to go back up to 4. And just, my request for consideration. And I think I saw Councillor Watt next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would echo Mayor Michael's sentiments. I'd like to see a middle ground. I understand the philosophy behind what Councillor Nelson's proposing here, but I think it's the all or nothing approach probably isn't the right way. And with regards to your comments, Councillor Magoon, we know some councillors who barely even get to chair 1 a month when they're deputy. I'm not thinking of anyone in particular, but some people don't get as much opportunity as others as it is.
It's true.
So, but I do think the middle ground is probably the best way to go. I do think we need a more consistent presence at the chairmanship, and I think the mayor as a position is generally the person who should have that the most opportunity. But I agree with you in the sense that deputy mayors do need the opportunity to get a little bit of experience before they're thrown into the lion's den of a public hearing. So, thank you.
Councillor Nelson?
Yeah, and if I could just speak to this, this was something that the mayor and I have talked about, and we get in a pretty wicked echo chamber. And there are some things that when we're also the procedural bylaw update committee, I wouldn't want something like this coming as part of the recommendation. Like, this is where I even talked about it at the forum last night. Like, some things we need to do ahead of time, and I think we'd be doing a disservice to council and the committee if we would come back and all of a sudden how we chair meetings is completely different. So this is, the intent of this is some of the philosophical things to get these hammered out now so that when we bring that procedural bylaw back, it's 90%, not 60%. And then hopefully it's lots of little stuff, but no big philosophical issues or amendments that need to be made. So I appreciate the discussion. I'm not passionate about this either way. I'll still vote in favor of it, but it's more to gain the understanding for our committee moving forward.
Mr. Mayor?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Councillor Nelson, for saying that. I was going to speak along those lines. And regarding the public hearings, I've always had the thought that public hearings should actually be chaired by the mayor. I just never understood. Early in terms, I've had many councillors who are like, oh, I'm nervous about it. It's like, really, that's what I'm doing right away is a public hearing. It's not something of repetition. So I wouldn't want that to be the argument, though, to go against the mayor chairing other meetings. Perhaps the answer is flipping that, where the mayor does do the chairing of public hearings, and that's something that we can look at the agenda prep committee. But please share your thoughts, because again, Councillor Nelson brought up a good point. We want to be close. We don't want to bring something radical to council and then spend 3-4 meetings changing a lot of stuff. So any insight on that, please share that with your committee. But with that being said, I won't support the total switch to all 3. And yeah, that's all. Thanks.
Just speaking to that, because I think it's relevant to the conversation on the table, that I certainly would support. I think putting that responsibility in the hands of the mayor then could sway me to support 2 meetings a month for the mayor and 1 for the deputy. Then it would be an easy sell for me. Thank you very much.
If I could, I think we've had too much discussion for a friendly amendment to take place, but if there was an amendment to talk about first or second, regular and second standing, I'd probably support that amendment if somebody wanted to make that.
Council, Councillor Ostashik.
I'd like to ask the chair to call the motion to question.
Duly put at this point. Council, I think we have had enough conversation at this point, so I will call this to question. That council seek consensus that the mayor chairs all council meetings and special meetings unless absent. All those in favor, please indicate. All those opposed? And that is defeated. Thank you. Good conversation all around. I think council, thank you so much. Administration, the same. Thank you for your thoughts on all of those thus far. Council, do we have any more new points to bring up before we look to bring the impacts of the new meeting schedule to a close? Seeing none, then we will move on to our additional information, beginning with urgent matters from council. Councillor Race, we'll begin with you. Do you have any urgent matters to bring up?
I do not, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Race. Councillor Ostashik.
I have no urgent matters. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councillor Haas.
None for me.
Councillor Nelson.
Yeah, I don't know how urgent is defined, but I received some feedback today after a couple posts on social media about the fact that there's been no civic send or really advertisement of a budget this weekend. And I received that actually from one of the members of the media as well, saying, yeah, we got the email that went out, but there's been no actual public comment on it. And so, looking at what we're hoping to be a really solid budget process, if there's a little bit more awareness from the public, even if it's just through this conversation, I think it would be beneficial so that we can, make sure the public has had the opportunity to know that we're having, 12 hours of budget discussion starting on Friday night. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Nelson. Administration, would you like to comment on that potentially?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll look into what communications are planned for the remainder of the week and ensure that something's sent out.
Thank you. Thank you. Anything else, Councillor Nelson? No. Councillor Wall?
If I could just build off of what Councillor Nelson said, just to get it out there in the public now, is there a way for the public to watch or engage or participate? And when will the budget meeting agenda or budget be available for review?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through to Councillor Watt. The meetings will be live streamed, so through YouTube. The information for the budget agenda and the documents will be available to council and the public first thing in the morning. We were hoping to have them out before the council meeting this afternoon and didn't quite get across that finish line. And then we're looking to this evening actually to get it out, and I think it's going to be tomorrow morning instead. So you should see it in your email inboxes by 9 a.m. At the latest. So everything will be out at that time.
Thank you. And beyond that, nothing, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Wall. Mr. Mayor?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I know this answer partially, but I've been messaged many times today regarding the assessment little flyer. So there's for whoever's listening, there's a little doorknob hanger to book an appointment with your assessor for your home. This is legitimate. A lot of people are asking if it's legitimate. They haven't heard from it. My question, I guess my request to administration is, and I can do it via email or I'll share it here, is just to get some facts on it. What if they don't call back? Do they have to do this? That kind of information. I think we as council should be able to share that with the community exactly, because I clicked on the civic send thing and it talked about that it's legitimate. I don't know if you have to do it or what are the penalties if you don't call back or if you don't book anything. So any information on that so we can really go to the public. There's already been a bit of an outcry on Facebook. A few people are just confused by it. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I certainly have nothing, so we will move on to the CAO status report and the action pending list.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do have a couple of things to touch on tonight. First off, I just wanted to extend additional apologies for the sound issues for the town hall meeting last night. I know folks tuning in couldn't see, but behind the scenes, admin and PATH folks are scrambling to figure out what was going on. All of the run-throughs were smooth. We do test these things before we go live, and everything was in place to ensure smooth town hall meeting. Fortunately, something went awry and it took about 45 minutes to figure out what it was and how to fix it. So just wanted to note that the questions and answers are being transcribed. They're going to be posted and sent as a civic send. So for people that didn't hear what was going on, we're looking to make that right, but just wanted to extend some apologies there. I also wanted to touch on, so there's a couple of things, and one will come with Sandra and her legislative update. But there's some emerging items that administration is seeking, I guess, some discussion with council on in order to understand we should be preparing something for a December 1st meeting for decision. And the first one that I'll touch on is the Rapid Housing Initiative. So that came up at the town hall meeting last night, some questions around what is the town doing? Are they looking at this? So I did want to give council an update because it was very timely and was discussed last night. Administration has been reviewing that opportunity alongside an opportunity to apply for some CMHC seed funding for the Bhutan lands. So we've been working with Colliers on that related grant application. Some of that information can be used for both applications, but there is a lot of heavy lifting and work to be done to have a shovel-ready project on that land in order to apply for this grant. It's not to say that it can't be done, it can. The timelines are tight, and we need to look for support outside of the capacity that we have internally as administration in order to carry that across the finish line by December 31st. So that will require an investment to continue to work. We've been working with Colliers to continue to work with them on that application. The investment, and I'll turn it over to Peter for a minute and to also assist in answering any of your questions on this. The investment is looking to come in at about $40,000 in order to prepare what's needed. So we're really preparing a project to apply for this grant, which can provide up to 100% funding if you check all of the boxes of the grant application, and not just checking the boxes, but make sure you're meeting all of the requirements and have a solid application put together. Without having a shovel-ready project on that land, that work would have to be done in order to apply and to secure that funding. So administration can prepare a report and bring that to council December 1st for decision. If council is interested in that and has an appetite to go after this grant and see what's possible, again, that there is I don't want to say it's substantial, but there is a serious investment in order to get that done by the timeline, which is the end of December. I just want to ask Mr. Vanna, did I miss anything in that explanation that you would like to add? And then over to council for any questions that you may have.
Sure. Thank you, Emily. Mr. Chairman, just to kind of clarify some points here. I think what we're looking for tonight is whether or not council wants to go ahead with this or not. From the Rapid Housing Initiative, what it is the federal government has set aside $1 billion for dealing with a couple of emergent issues, one of them being homelessness, another one dealing with transition housing. Part of it is for seniors, and this is where we feel that we do have a good chance, a good opportunity to be able to access some of these dollars. Half of those funds have already gone to some of the bigger cities that certainly have these homelessness issues that are really apparent in the news and if you drive to those cities. So that leaves the other half to other communities, and that's really where in our discussions with Colliers, we believe there is an opportunity to be able to access, if not a portion of it, all of the money that we would need to actually build. What we're talking about is the tiny home area. That will be our first phase on the Bhutan lands. The critical factor here is there are two critical factors. One of them is that the deadline for the submission is December 31st. In order for us to actually get to that point, we need something. I would prefer a motion tonight if we could get something from council that would allow us to give us a comfort to proceed with this, that you are in support of us applying for the grant. And then that would allow us to start working with Colliers to prepare that application. My fear is that if we're waiting a long time for that, we will not be able, next council meeting, we will not be able to have the opportunity or the time to be able to actually prepare the application. The other critical factor here is that if we were successful in obtaining that particular grant, then the project actually has to be completed within 12 months of receiving the dollars. So what that really translates into is a major effort in using outside resources like a Colliers to help us to project manage this and to really deal with things like, you know, building units off site, mobilizing them onto site, similar to what is happening with the current development next door. And so that's an important factor that I just want to share with council. This doesn't preclude us from, if we're not moving ahead with the rapid housing, to as we've mentioned before, apply for the seed funding. And we would certainly want to continue to do that, apply for the seed funding for sure, to deal with the servicing of the entire lands, or the design of the entire lands to get those serviced. So I just want to share that with council to so that you have that information.
Thank you, Mr. Vanna. Councillor Race, did I see your hand up? Perfect. Councillor Race.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I wanted to address my question to Mr. Vanna, if I may. So in reading the document, and I could be wrong here, but I thought it also spoke to, you know, if we had existing buildings or that they could be revamped, they could be repurposed, and we could be using this monies to do that. Is that correct?
That's in fact what some cities, and I'll take Edmonton as an example. So they've actually leased out or occupied certain hotels in the city to use that for homelessness. I mean, part of the issue for us is that we're looking at our Bhutan lands as the opportunity, particularly in that first phase. And the second one is that in terms of dealing with, let's say, homelessness as an example, that's really not where our focus is on this particular case. It really is about being able to deal with seniors housing and provide that opportunity.
May I continue, Mr. Chair?
Please do.
So do we have any buildings, any facilities that would fall under this umbrella that we could utilize, fix up?
We haven't done that. We have not done that research in terms of whether those opportunities exist or not.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Race. I have myself in the queue next. I'd certainly love to discuss this item as a council, but I think this is, for myself, a good example of where, if it's important enough, a special meeting, for example, next Tuesday would be good, in that we could receive a full report from administration with the potential cost implications that are made public to the community. From a procedural standpoint, at a standing committee meeting, I'm not comfortable doing that because this potentially does have budgetary impacts. I just procedurally, I think if this is important, and I think it could be, if we're chasing down such a large grant, it should be done as fully transparently as possible. So, take advantage of the special meeting and let's have a full report presented and deal with it there. That would be my opinion. I have Councillor Hawes and Councillor Ostashik.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I guess I'm kind of looking at this a little bit differently. I realize we have the Bhutan lands and stuff like that, but I'm thinking of the same, and that was my question too, because I wasn't sure if this could be an existing build or it had to be a new construction. And what I'm hearing is it could be an existing build. And, we look at, there are potentially seniors that are homeless as well in our community, along with many others as well. And I'm wondering, because it's such a quick turnaround, that if we could find, and as an example, and actually I'm using this from an email that we received from one of our citizens and also a manager of a local agency, help, that they were looking into potentially a home such as similar to the women's shelter, but looking at it as a shelter for whether it's homeless or whether it's transitional or whatever in the interim. So I'm wondering if potentially that might be an area to look at for a faster look at if we have potentially housing available that we could be refurbished to fit these parameters, and it might then fill a need for some existing problems that we have in our community. Maybe not for the Bhutan area, but new builds, but what may be existing already. So I would be also open to potentially looking at this more with a special meeting as well, and have a more in-depth conversation and more input on budgetary and more about the program itself. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Haas. Councillor Ostashik.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would potentially be in favor of having a meeting at some point in the future to discuss this if the timeline fits with administration. But in terms of giving some kind of direction to date, there's absolutely no way that I would be able to support that. I don't know enough about the Rapid Housing Initiative and how it would reflect back on the impact on our municipality regarding budget, and there seems like a lot of ducks to get in a row before the deadline in 6 weeks. So if it fits a timeline, I would support having a discussion on it. If not, we could look at other options too. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Waugh.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I was going to echo what you and Councillor Stash had said. I'm not particularly comfortable making a decision like this tonight. I really don't have a really good understanding of what the financial implications are, the risk reward, cost benefit, all those different components. But with that said, I would like to ask administration, if we were to call a special meeting in a week, how much would that impact the timeline? If that's the direction we decide to go.
CAO.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I would have to confer with the team on what is possible to pull together. We're approaching budget this weekend, and to prepare a detailed report. I'm not sure what level of detail we'd be able to get to. We've heard a couple of things from council tonight about research on available properties to do something else now. I'm not sure that we would be able to answer all of those questions. We could present some information on the initiative and on, our conversations with Colliers and on the potential investment into the Bhutan land option and what that would take. Anything outside of that might be difficult to achieve. I just want to temper some expectations as well. We would prioritize, or we'd need to work on that report in order to have it in council by Friday to review ahead of Tuesday. So I could see what could be done if we could check into what work would need to be put into this and decide on that special meeting at that time. We were looking for kind of an appetite from council on whether this was something that council was interested in pursuing, maybe not necessarily just getting that idea from council, whether that was something that they were interested in. I'll leave it at that.
Follow up.
Yeah, I'm interested in pursuing it, but when we're talking about costs for outside help, I'd like to know what those costs are. Is it just to get the application in? Does it include all the outside help we're going to need to get the project to fruition on the timeline? And then weigh that against what the potential revenue sources will be. What are the full amounts of the grants we could get, either through the rapid fire or through the CMH funding. So I'd like to just get a better understanding of what those different considerations are before I'd want to go full bore into it. But I am interested in pursuing it. It's money to achieve a goal that we have in mind. So
thank you, Councillor Waugh. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm of the mindset we spent a little bit of time and I'm happy CEO Olson said she wants to temper the expectations. I don't have very high expectations. I appreciate it coming to us tonight. Let's have a conversation. I'm even of the mindset, why don't we spend half an hour on Saturday? We have a 7-hour meeting on Saturday or Friday. We tack in an update. All right, we don't have high expectations, but it's more than we have tonight. Something on cost for Colliers. Colliers, we worked with them for the Evergreens project for Pine Valley. They are exceptional at what they do, and I'm happy Mr. Vanna spoke that they could do the work. Let's get some preliminary info, take half an hour perhaps on one of those 2 days, get a bit more info. We have concurrent meetings now. I think it's efficient. And then at that case, we can pivot and we can move forward maybe Tuesday with a special meeting. But it's a bit more than tonight. And I know it's not really the way we generally practice, but in order to solve something tonight, it's going to be difficult. Let's have fresh eyes on this for half an hour, I believe, on the weekend with a special meeting or whatever mechanism concurrent with our budget meeting and choose to pivot or not. It would be my recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Nelson.
Yeah, my question kind of lies really around the homelessness piece of it. And if it is required to be a solution for homelessness, not for housing stock or affordability or something like that, then I don't really have a huge interest in the Booten lands. I think if we start that with addressing homelessness only, I think it may stymie the future development of future phases. If it's viewed by developers and by interested parties now as a homelessness area, I think it could undermine our ability to do bigger things with it. So if that's a requirement, outside that, if we can accomplish what our thought process was and came up to design charrette through Bhutan, I'm in. But if homelessness has to be that huge part of it, I think there'd be way too much for me to consider prior to the deadlines that it would probably render it unable from my personal perspective. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Haas.
Yeah, and Mr. Vanna, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm looking at the what is the program itself, and it talks about affordability, and it does refer to all units must serve and be affordable housing. Household units is paying less than 30% of gross income on housing costs to target people in populations who are vulnerable, meaning either homeless or imminent risk of homelessness. Now, maybe that's just part of it, but that's what I'm seeing. And I agree with Councillor Nelson that, I mean, do we want to go down that road in a potentially area that we're looking to build upon and to look at taking that parcel of land for it? That's where I was of the mind, potentially, if that's what it's targeting, is looking at more of a unit that already is in our community, potentially, whether it's a house that is large enough or for sale and can we refurbish it to meet the needs of what this grant looks at. So, but I too would, if I may echo, I think that Mayor Michaels brought up an excellent point on the Saturday meeting. Gives us a little more time to even council to look at what the wrapped housing initiative parameters are and have that conversation on Saturday to give a little bit more flexibility in that conversation and whether or not we do want to go down this road or consider other options in the future. So thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Ostashik.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I've got concerns about trying to potentially shoehorn something into the Bhutan lands that wasn't part of the original vision for that area and how it might impact the area moving forward. Just because we're in a time crunch and that's land available, the incentive to shoehorn it in here might not in the long term be the best decision. What I was looking at was more in lines of some of the recommendations that we've received from outside agencies and that Councillor Haas just mentioned about maybe taking an existing building and developing it into some type of a homeless shelter accommodation for homeless people or low income people. And that's more of an avenue that I would want to pursue potentially rather than trying to shoehorn it into some land that we currently have available, but might not necessarily be the best fit. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Mr. Merritt.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On that note, I share the same sentiments as the last few comments. Like, I guess my question to administration, what kind of information could we get regarding partnerships, whether it's with HELP or other organizations in the community for something of this nature? What could we get by Saturday or Tuesday in order to create that dialogue amongst council to see if we want to move forward with something of that nature.
Mr. Vanna?
Yeah, I'll defer to Mr.
Mr. Chairman, I just in order to respond to some of the talk that's going around the table, just to be clear from administration's perspective, the idea behind the rapid housing initiative, administration's perspective, is to follow the plan that was established and came to council in terms of the tiny homes. It is not to pursue homelessness and conversion of existing buildings. If it's council's desire to do that and to make that application on that basis, I would say that administration does not have the expertise or the time to be able to do that and to apply for this grant. The notion behind applying for the rapid housing initiative was the fact that based on our plan that came to council, we would be able to, so to speak, check enough of the boxes that would satisfy the grant. Initially, when we looked at it, we were not sure about that, but in discussions with Colliers who have reviewed the grant application, have said yes, there's enough information, and it goes in the spirit of what the grant is trying to achieve. And based on that, you would have a good opportunity to be able to access funds for that. So that's the reason why we brought it forward to council, because it's based on what our plan that we brought to council already. The cost is fairly nominal in the sense of it's $45,500 to prepare the necessary materials and background research to prepare the grant application on our behalf. And so, if council would like to discuss that on Saturday, we're certainly open to doing that.
Perfect. Thank you, Mr. Vanna. Councillor Haas.
Yeah, I guess I guess this is where I need more, but I guess I'm confused because when I look at the initiative provides, I see the 12 months, I see the, commitment by December 31st to commit all funds. But when I look at this, it's saying affordable housing for vulnerable people with severe housing needs, specifically people at risk or experiencing homelessness or living in temporary shelters because of the COVID-19 pandemic. I mean, I guess where I'm struggling with is when we heard the charrette, which I'm totally in favor, I was excited about the idea of tiny homes, but some of those tiny homes I was hearing were not all that affordable for what this grant seems to be targeting. And I guess that's where I'm confused as to who we're targeting for this, because all I'm seeing here is this people that are either homeless or on the verge of homelessness, and I don't see the tiny homes in Bhutan fitting that bill. I guess that's where I'm confused. And I'm, again, maybe we need some more research and more discussion on this, but I'm just reading some of this stuff and it doesn't seem to fit for it. And Mr. Van, I apologize, but I just don't understand that area specifically for what I'm reading here, so.
Well, I think I'll jump in at this point. I have no other councillors on the list. I think actually this would be a good discussion item for Saturday. Now that administration's heard your concerns, I think Mr. Vanna then could present that information on Saturday with the specifics of how it, in administration and Collier's perspective, it does particularly fit in. Otherwise, I think we're starting to verge over into, actually discussing the item that maybe we should be discussing on Saturday. So certainly with respect, I'd like that answer too. I just, we're getting, it's 7:40 and we still have other items to take care of. So, council, I think we're potentially looking for some kind of direction to administration to bring this back by Saturday is what I've heard, but not yet necessarily clearly made in terms of a direction on paper to admit. So, Councilor Nelson?
I think it's based on the conversation, the mayor can call a special meeting at any time with 24 hours notice, and I'd kind of leave it up to him, maybe some conversations with admin, whether they can turn it around really go from there and let them figure that part of it out.
Perfect. Thank you, Councillor Nelson. Council, any further discussion? Administration, any further comments? Perfect. Thank you very much to everybody involved in that. CAO, if there's anything you'd like to continue on.
Thank you. At this point, moving into the legislative update, there is an additional item, merging item that we'd like to discuss. So Sandra has some information. I included some of that in an email to council at the end of last week. And I'll ask Sandra to take us through the election bylaw.
Thank you, CAO Olson. So some election processes require approval from council. And there's three things actually that we need to know if you guys want to change or leave status quo for December 31st. The first one is basically right now on a nomination on nomination form, 5 signatures are required. So you can change that to be not more than 100 signatures by bylaw. So, and another thing is location for filing nomination papers. Currently, we have just the town office, which I would think would be sufficient. It's not like we're a huge rural municipality to have more than one location. And the next thing too, you can also put in place to have a deposit accompany the when their nomination papers are dropped off. So just 3 things. If you just want to leave it status quo, it just stays that it's 5 signatures. The town is where the drop off is, and no deposits required. Or if you guys want it changed, we can prepare a bylaw and bring it back. Guess just looking for what your thoughts are.
Councillor Nelson.
Yeah, I think for the most part, status quo is fine with me. Going through it last time, you know, if I had to get 10, maybe I wouldn't be here today. But the only question I had is, depending on what happens with the town and with the province, should we include a provision for electronic nomination submissions? Because if for some reason the public buildings are closed, does there need to be some sort of way around that? So that would be my only question. If there's a way to do that within our existing bylaw, I'm happy, but that's, yeah, thank you.
CAO.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That's something that we could look into. I don't believe I've seen anything in any of we've taken some training and webinars and things like that on this. Nothing to that effect has come about. We do have the Dropbox out front, though it's not time stamped, or there wouldn't be any indication of when something was dropped off. However, the nomination period is such that it's quite long. It's not a nomination day. So it's something we could look into, but I don't have the information on any changes today.
Perfect. Councillor Wong.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Excellent point raised by Councillor Nelson. But beyond that, I'm happy with status quo. I don't think a deposit is necessary, and everything else seems to be working just fine.
I have myself, then Councillor Ostashik, and simply put, yes, status quo. I haven't seen any major hiccups in the past to warrant any changes to that process. Councillor Ostashik.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I did have a question for administration. It's regarding the purpose of the deposit and how it works.
Edmund?
So the purpose of the deposit, as I understand it, is to deter folks from submitting nomination papers when they're not truly committed. So they do receive that money back. It is a deposit, but in some communities, larger communities, it's up to $1,000. So municipalities with over 10,000 as their population can create a deposit of that amount to deter, I guess, false starts during the nomination period.
Can I follow up, Mr. Chair?
Please.
So what are the conditions that a candidate has to meet to qualify to get their deposit back?
That is something I'm not sure of, Ms. Randall, or?
I'm not sure either. Not on that one. I don't know. I'd have to research it for you guys.
I can follow up then?
Please.
Yeah, because the one thing that I did think was a little bit odd actually is that we don't require a deposit because it shows seriousness of intent on the part of the potential candidate. But with that said though, without understanding what the purpose of the deposit is and the conditions that the candidate has to meet to be able to get that deposit back after, I would need more information on whether that would be something I would support or not moving forward. As far as the rest of it, I'm fine with. The deposit, I would frankly like some more information on though.
CAO.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If I could defer to Mr. Baez, he's taken all of the training and attended all of the as well. He may have some clarity.
Mr. Fahad.
Thank you, Chair. So I don't think there is any conditions. I think the main reason, just adding to what Sia also already said, is that one of the big changes in election law for like next year's election is a nomination period. So before it used to be just a nomination day. So the chance for someone to come in, submit an application and withdraw within the same day were very low. So it was a high commitment act to decide, come that day, submit the nomination and not withdraw. But from next year onwards, the nomination period is going to be from January 1st till 2 weeks before the election. That's like 6-7 months. So if we don't have a deposit, there is a possibility that someone can just come in, submit, withdraw, unlikely, but that would be the purpose, like Sia Olson said, to deter people from continuously changing their mind and having a deposit as sort of like a deterrent, which might not be ideal, but that's the intention behind it. And so it mainly because the nomination period is changing to like 7 months instead of 1 day. So.
If I can follow up then, Mr. Chair.
Please.
Yeah, thank you very much for that qualification, that change in process. That makes quite a difference now, actually. So I think with knowing that, I think I would likely support some type of a deposit for candidate, considering they have 6 months to frivolously throw their hat in the ring and then say, well, no, actually I don't. And if there's multiple people that do that, that could dissuade some other potential candidates from putting their names in. And I just think it would indicate seriousness of intent and there would be some maybe a little additional sober second thought from potential candidates before they decided or not for sure to file their nomination papers. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ostashik. Councillor Nelson.
Yeah, that's going to a couple of questions written legislation. It is that ability to, there's no restriction of how many times you can go in and out as long as you've got those 5 signatures. And although I think it's unlikely that people would go in and out of the same position, there could be strategic things that people do to nominate yourself for mayor early and then pull out as mayor and then decide to run for council, because now the person who was maybe running for mayor now runs for council. So there actually can be some strategic gaming that has never happened before. That is, I hope it doesn't happen here, but it's certainly a strategy already. In Grand Prairie, that conversation's already taking place of how do we do this so that we get the right candidates in the right positions and pulling out late. So it is something that exists. And to me, if there's a deposit of $100 or $200 and one of those is refundable for the position that you ultimately run for and are on the docket for. So if you want to go back and forth and spend $1,000 to be mayor and then council and mayor and then council, you'll get $100 back, your one deposit for the one position. So I do think there's some consideration there that protects things getting weird. Thank you.
Councillor Haas.
Just a quick question about it, and I've been trying to do some reading on it and reading through the new one, but is there going to be information out there for, I see you're nodding your head, but so, whether it's a workshop or whatever it is to understand the new, because I mean, my question comes to the head too, is because I thought, if I recall in the last election, you can't start campaigning until 30 days prior, but if you have how does that then look? Because I mean, you could nominate in January and are they campaigning for that entire time? What's going to stop that? So I guess, are we going to have that type of information coming forward? Or I'll shut up now, I'm not figuring it out.
Thank you. I'll defer to Mr. Fahad.
Thank you, Chair. So one of the main reasons why they changed that nomination period, is to align it with the campaign period and with how they also count when you can self-finance, things like that. And so there are lots of big changes in the Local Elections Act. And in the December 1st regular meeting, we'll be bringing forward the report for direction for appointing the returning officer and the deputy returning officer, which has to be done prior to the nomination period beginning, which has to be done so in December 1st. And in that report, we'll be including all the changes. And so in that meeting, you can go to the report, see what the changes are, and we'll include all those information for the public and the council. And if you have questions, then you can ask the CEO, Sandra, or me. So
Okay,
that would be my
excellent, thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Councillor Haas. Councillor Nelson.
Sorry, I was pointing that way.
Oh,
Ms. Rendell had her hand up there.
oh, Ms. Randall.
I just wanted to also too, in the nomination packages that we'll prepare to give each potential candidate that wants to run, we'll have all the information with all the changes to the Election Act.
Thank you.
I'm also looking at this point for Councillor Race. We appear to. If I could just look to see if she's still. Oh, there she is. Good, good.
Got her battery back.
Okay.
Sorry, my computer's dying on me, so.
No problem.
Have to
Thanks,
fix it.
Councillor Race. Council, sorry, we're still on the update and the legislative services update. Anything further from administration?
Thank you. So I guess just some clarification on, and I don't know if it's appropriate at this point to seek consensus from council on bringing a report with the updated bylaw for those areas of council decision-making for an elections bylaw, including the deposit for nomination period, the additional locations, and the more than 5 signatures. This is something that it was emerging. We've had about a week or so knowing that this is something that we need to include in a bylaw and bring to council. So we were preparing to bring something should council be interested for December 1st, knowing that the readings of the bylaw would have to be, we'd have to be diligent for that. There is potential for a special meeting in December to pass an interim bylaw. So we're working that out with the agenda prep committee. However, at some point in December that the changes would need to be discussed and all readings of the bylaw approved. Appreciate that it's a tight turnaround, but we're working on about a week's notice for needing to bring this forward.
Okay. Councillor Nelson.
I'd like to direct administration to bring back do you want a request for decision or a report?
Either, I guess, a request for decision.
A request for decision in regards to the Elections Act?
And I'm looking to Ms. Rendell and Mr. Pius, the elections bylaw. Is that so we would need to create and attach the bylaw.
Ms. Rendell?
Yeah, if we could have just like a direction to bring a bylaw to the December 1st meeting. If you guys could kind of maybe decide on a amount you would like to charge for a deposit, we could have that in the bylaw ready for you to pass.
Elections bylaw reflecting best practices and local context, which includes a minimum deposit amount of $100. Is that broad enough for you? Sure. Extremely amenable, yet again. I'm just trying to make it broad enough that administration can bring back based on kind of these conversations and the questions that have been asked, but understanding we're under a bit of a time crunch. So thank you.
Council, there is direction on the table. Any discussion? Councillor Ostashik?
Yeah, I'm fine with the proposed direction, other than I'm not sure about the amount of $100, if that's enough to be deemed an appropriate amount for a candidate deposit, or if it should be more. I'm not sure, sorry, I should clarify. I think if there's a potential that somebody's being strategic about how they're nominating and withdrawing, that maybe $100 isn't enough to potentially dissuade them from doing that. Thank you.
Councillor Wong.
Yeah, and I'll be speaking in favor of this. I got no problem. I know I originally had said I was happy with status quo, but what's been discussed here on the table has given me some reason to reflect, and a deposit might be a good decision. But I share Councillor Stash's concerns. If some of the gamesmanship that's been bandied about the table here is actually something that could happen, I don't think $100 is going to be enough to really curb that in any way. But I do think if administration has a chance to research maybe what some other municipalities are doing, that it's a minimum of 100, but best practices, they may find that it's actually $500 or something else. So I'm fine with the wording the way it is if that's the way that it's interpreted.
I have myself up next. I could see myself supporting this direction so that it would come to council with a potential minimum, but I would be remiss if I didn't point out the fact that for as much as we've bandied about the concerns about rich fat cats who are playing political games, I have an equal concern about those people in our community to whom $100 or $200 or $300 would cause a significant impact to a monthly budget, but they have as much right to participate in the political process as anyone else, which is why I support the status quo. Never in my history since 2012 as a councillor through that nomination process have I seen anyone abuse that process. So I would rather err on the side of giving everybody the chance to participate rather than potentially alienating somebody because of a deposit that could cause them undue hardship. And I understand $100 for many households is not an undue hardship, but I think it's fair to say that's not universal. And so that causes me concern, and I would rather err on the side of giving everybody the chance to participate in democracy. And I have Councillor Nelson and the Mayor, and then Councillor Oz.
Yeah, I strongly agree, and I think anybody that wants to play the system is likely going to find that it will have consequences. And this year being the first time a nomination period 7 months is the first time we really had that opportunity. You would have had to do it within a 4-hour period. But I do think that that number can't go too high. That is something that you're required to submit prior to fundraising. You can't start fundraising until you've submitted your nominations. That's basically your invitation to now start fundraising. So with that money having to be submitted prior to fundraising, to me, $100 is something that shows that you're interested and it's serious enough, but shouldn't be a barrier for entry. And ultimately, if through best practices, administration finds that it isn't, then we can make that adjustment at that time too. So thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I support this for everything that's been said. Administration has a latitude to bring best practice. That number might be 200, 100, whatever, and then we'll discuss. So I'm in favor of this. Thank you.
Councillor Haas?
Yeah, and I'm in favor too with that latitude that we have. I just want to make one and I understand that, and all the time, I know you said, Councillor McGoon, however, things changed this year with the Election Act. This is a different process than we're ever used to before. So I'm not saying, that it's going to happen, and I agree with you wholeheartedly. Everybody should have the chance to run, but this is a whole different ball of wax when it takes the amount of time and for the nominations and everything. So that's the only thing. It's a significantly different. But I too support this and hearing what administration brings back to us for best practice. So thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. Before we call this to question, Councillor. Sorry, was this?
Yeah.
Councillor
I can wait till you do your business there.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
An idea what it is.
Council, I think we all know what's coming up. It's 8 p.m. I need a council. Thank you, Councillor Waugh.
I'd like to make a motion to extend the meeting.
Thank you very much, Councillor.
I'd like to speak to it. We have a committee meeting immediately after this. So normally if we're really close to the end of the meeting, I vote against extending because we could have done better work to get there, but we're going to be here for a while after this anyways, and we changed the bylaw for it to reflect concurrent meetings, so I'm fully in support of extending. Thank you.
Thank you. Council, any other discussion on the motion to extend? Seeing none, then I will call this to question. All those in favor, please indicate. And any opposed? Seeing none, that is carried unanimously. We do have a direction on the floor, and that is to direct administration to bring an updated elections bylaw reflecting best practices and local context, which includes a minimum deposit of $100. Councillor Ostache.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to propose an amendment, friendly or otherwise. And my amendment would be to remove amount of $100 and just have it end at minimum deposit.
Councillor Nelson.
Supremely amenable tonight. Thank you. Appreciate that, Councillor Stacher.
There we go. Council, there we go. So we still have this direction on the floor. Any further discussion? Seeing none, then I will call this to question. Direct administration to bring an updated elections bylaw reflecting best practices and local context, which includes a minimum deposit. All those in favor, please indicate. And any opposed? Seeing none, that is carried unanimously. Thank you very much, Council. Councillor Nelson. There we have it. Administration, does that take care of the direction you were hoping for?
Yes, thank you.
Perfect. Any further updates from legislative services?
No.
Then we will move on to executive assistant logistics information, which in lieu of Ms. Anderson, do we have any updates?
No.
Perfect. Seeing none, then council, we are looking to adjourn this meeting, but we will be moving into our emergency advisory committee meeting following that. Councilor Nelson.
I'd like to make a motion to adjourn. Extend.
Very well. Council, any discussion on that? Seeing none, then all those in favor, please indicate. Perfect. And we'll give everybody a 5-minute break to refresh before our next meeting, please.
Extend the agreement.
And